Hey, welcome to the Professional Roundtable for Narcotics Anonymous here in Georgia. The theme of this roundtable is collaborating on addictions, treatment, and research. You guys know where we are because you're here in person, but those of us that are online, we're located at the Weston Airport in Atlanta. And this, to our knowledge, this is the first professional roundtable that we've done actually in Georgia. I'm part of public relations and we do many public presentations, but we just haven't done this format exactly. So we're very excited to have you all here today. I'm very excited to get an exchange of information. Let's see. There we go. So what are our goals? We want to provide some information to everyone about Narcotics Anonymous, but we also want to get your feedback, the feedback from professionals about NA. We also want to create a cooperative relationship going forward. You know, we hope this is the beginning and not the end of anything. We want to learn from your experiences, so we're going to ask you about some of those. If we have an opportunity to dispel any myths that people might have about NA, probably people that you work with or deal with, that things that you've heard, this is a good opportunity for that. And finally, we really want your feedback so that we can improve. There are issues, some of which we might be aware of, but many things we're not aware of. And so that's one of the benefits of having you here today. I'd like to welcome everyone. My name is Jay. I'm an addict. I'm so used to identifying that way in Narcotics Anonymous. My role is I'm the public relations facilitator currently for the Georgia region, and the region is pretty much like the state of Georgia, pretty much equal to the state of Georgia. But before we begin, there's a few things I wanted to point out. Many people have helped set up this event. We've got 4 different zones that are participating, but to my right here, Welvina from the Northeast zone of Narcotics Anonymous and Joel B from the Florida region and the Southeastern zone like we are, have helped immensely because they've done this sort of thing where they're located. They do them routinely, so they help provide input to help us get started, and we're excited about that. There are going to be some refreshments available at a break. There is some water that someone found for us right behind where the last people who are sitting currently. You'll find it to the left there. We do have some information outside. You probably saw an information desk where we have some business cards, some literature, and some posters about Narcotics Anonymous that you're welcome to take with you. If there's a public place that you can hang them, that would be great. That would be great. It would help us get the message out. And lastly, if anybody needs to use the restroom, if you take a left after exiting the room here, it will be down past the elevators to the left and then to the right by the business center. What is our agenda? We're going to have 2 main portions separated by a break. The first one is really going to be a roundtable dialogue with our panelists here in person and also online, where we're going to be doing question and answer. Basically, we're going to be asking some questions and getting some information. Then there will be a break for about 15-20 minutes. I believe it's that long, maybe longer. And then this afternoon, we are going to do questions, but these questions will not be coming from us. That's why we have these index cards in your seats. We would like, as you go along, if things occur to you, things that you've always wanted to ask, or you want to ask our panelists, then it's a perfect opportunity. Or if our panelists would like to ask questions of us or anybody else, it's a perfect opportunity for you to write a question down. You can turn them in at the break, and then we will answer them this afternoon. So I guess I just covered that. For the virtual participants, please use the chat feature. I mean, if you really needed to, if chat wasn't working for you, I think it should be working for everyone. If you're on a phone, you can still access it on the phone. I was going to say, if you needed another way to reach us, you could email me at pr@grscna.com, which is our web domain, and I could get them that way. But chat would be preferable. We are monitoring that as we go. Who are our panelists? Who did we invite today? We have many community partners, but there were basically 3 types of community partners that we thought about inviting today that we worked hard to reach. And the first were treatment providers. We wanted to pick some treatment providers since this was our first one that could give us a pretty broad perspective on NA in Georgia. So we have Reese Daniel here. He's the former CEO at Twin Lakes Recovery Center. He also was COO at Peachford Hospital. Those of you from Atlanta probably know Peachford Hospital. That's pretty well known. So, and he's a certified addictions counselor now that he's not serving in those positions. Peyton Wagner, she's on her way. She's not here yet, right? Not sitting down in the audience. Okay, she's on her way. She has worked for 2 decades as a certified addictions counselor. She does have an MS degree in clinical mental health counseling, and right now she's a counselor at Modern Path using cognitive behavioral therapy techniques. And then Lisa Carter Green is online. I see her, and she has a master's degree at Mercer University. She's a licensed professional counselor, and I have to say, from my professional life, I knew her as a counselor, or we've paths. I've seen her name on reports and evaluations. So I know that she's in the Macon area, but I know she also works with children and adolescents, I was going to say. Then from our legal group, we have 2 people online that are from the Accountability Courts Council for Georgia, Josh Becker and Tara Zealous. Josh is the assistant director for the Council of Accountability Court Judges of Georgia. And he's got a master's in public policy from Georgia State. Previously, he was with the Certification Program Office and Research Analyst at the Administrative Office of the Courts of Georgia. And then Tara Zealous is the Treatment Services Program Manager. So she actually deals with treatment professionals, but also at the Council of Accountability Court Judges of Georgia. She's also a licensed professional counselor in McDonough, Georgia, and previously behavioral health treatment court liaison for Georgia. So we're excited to have both of them. Andy got held up in a jury trial. He is a public servant, so he can't really control those type of events. I'm not sure if he's going to be joining us remotely, but we'll keep an eye out for him if he does come. He is a public defender, an attorney at the Northeastern Judicial Circuit. He's currently senior assistant public defender for Hall County, licensed for 33 years, and a criminal defense lawyer in Gainesville, Georgia, who attended Campbell University. And then finally, we invited a group that really showed up here in person from our recovery community organizations. We always use the acronym RCOs. And I'm expecting one of them still online, but here in person, we have Hank Arnold, the executive director of Coweta Force, which is a recovery community organization in Coweta County, and a mirror image coordinator at Talbot Recovery Campus in the past, and a recovery advocate. Catherine Newcomb is the one that I'm expecting from the Change Center in Albany, Georgia. So she's in South Georgia, and I believe she's going to be, hey, there's Peyton. Hi, you can join us here if you like.
Fantastic.
And, but here also from Reboot Jackson, we have Jennifer Langston, who is the executive director at Reboot Jackson, which is a recovery community organization in Jackson County. She's a certified peer specialist of addictive disease and a medication-assisted treatment specialist. She's also a forensic peer mentor. And then Jonathan Langston, who's the president and founder of Reboot Jackson, also in Jackson County, Georgia again, is a certified peer specialist of addictive disease. So we have people from different backgrounds. We wanted to have some RCOs here because we're not sure that everybody is aware of what recovery community organizations are. And this will be a chance that we can actually ask them questions and find out. So the basis for NA, I'm not going to go into all the history because I believe the people here today do have a working understanding of our NA, of the Narcotics Anonymous program, and that does make it a little bit easier. We're often referred to as a 12-step or sponsorship-based or mutual help program. And it is based on the 12 steps of Narcotics Anonymous. They're the basis of our recovery program. 12 steps refers to what the program's based on, and sponsorship refers to how we go about working the 12 steps. We work with an experienced guide. Mutual help really refers to a peer-to-peer approach rather than a professional to addicts approach. Just real quick, we do a survey of our membership, and I can give you the links to that. It's very good information. All of this is on the Georgia Regional Service Committee website. for professionals, we have a page for all the literature links that you can go to. But just for example, I always find it interesting about the areas of our life that improve from being in recovery. You know, family relationships, number one, social connection, hobbies, interest, employment is always a good thing, stable housing, and then education advancement. Not sure everybody realizes that that happens to people in recovery so frequently, but that's a very high correlation. So what is NA like? Like if you have people that are going to be, that you send to our program, what should they expect? It is a voluntary recovery program. It's not a treatment center. We also do not provide oversight like probation officers do. So it is voluntary. It's up to the individual to participate. What happens at an NA meeting? We pass out key tags to recognize clean time. That's a way of encouraging people to develop a pattern of abstinence. We practice sponsorship, and then we have various meeting formats about how we run meetings. The seventh tradition comes up when we're dealing with people in the public. It's about self-sufficiency. And what we expect for new people coming in is basically we help out. We put chairs away. You know, we take out the garbage. We join by offering little acts of service that make us feel a part of. And then also for schedules and helpline numbers, that is something that people can get at our meetings. We also want to make sure that you're aware of how to get that information today. Our number one, did I skip one? No, our primary goal is helping addicts stay clean. And the people here today also share in that. So we share the same primary goal. Reaching NA in Georgia. You can go to our website. I referenced it a couple of times. The GR stands for Georgia Region, SC for Service Committee, and NA obviously Narcotics Anonymous. That's our acronym, but it's not spelled out, so you have to just kind of work with us there. That's our official website for the state. That has the most up-to-date meeting information. You click on meetings menu heading when you go to that website. Also, people ask on web, I don't know if this is something that everybody recommends. I haven't really checked this with all the other addicts, but frequently when you're on a mobile device, we do have apps for NA meetings, but I've also found that if you want one if you want a way to pull up meeting information that is, let's call it platform agnostic, meaning it works for iPhones and Android devices alike. You can use something called catchupsearch.org, which is a website that our programmers set up to provide information for the public. And it's so simple. It pulls up a map of meetings and it goes off your geolocation of your phone. So that's a possibility. If people are looking to contact us, we have a 188 number, 947-7262. When you dial any of our helpline numbers, you get two options. One's to speak to a helpline volunteer. That's option number one. Two is for automatic meeting information, where you can basically say out loud or type in your zip code or city name. I recommend zip code to get the most accurate 5 closest meetings automatically texted back to you. That's how that works. And then you can email us at pr@grscna.com and it will come to the whole committee. So what are we discussing and addressing when it comes to the challenges today? The couple that we're aware of are addicts taking prescribed medications or doing medication-assisted treatment. The NA position or non-position, we try not to have, ever to have controversial positions. So, but on this has evolved over time. We have that's something that we can point you to the exact language that's been approved by our fellowship. We try not to turn people away. The only requirement for membership is a desire to stop using. Attendees getting record of attendance during times of COVID. This has been challenging. Not all of our fellowship likes to use email, and that can be a challenge. That's why I think it is helpful to be able to reach out to public relations by calling our 888 number or emailing us, because we can basically contact the local people on your behalf if that doesn't work in a meeting. But generally speaking, just as people are showing up for our meeting today virtually, that does happen in virtual meetings in Georgia. Some of our meetings are virtual, and you do have to speak up and go into chat to ask for help. And we recognize that that's not the way that NA has worked historically. It may not be as intuitive or as human, but that does happen, that you have to direct people to do that if they want to get help. Most of our meetings are going back in person now, so that shouldn't be as big of an issue as it has been. NA members taking medications, the first one, like I mentioned, we have several very good pieces of literature on this, including the most recent one, Narcotics Anonymous in Persons Receiving Medication-Assisted Treatment, that really, I think, very carefully details our position and how to still be open to people that come into our program under medication-assisted treatment. So I recommend any of these four that you would read, and you can find them all on our the professionals menu heading at our website. Attendance, like I think I've already covered that. It's a little tricky. It could be an issue with the accountability courts, and so that's partly why I wanted to cover that today, because they are here. There's something that we can offer, like after today, if you wanted public relations. We do presentations for different groups all the time. We can be asked to do that, and we'll come to your location for that. There's also, for the accountability courts and for others that this might apply to, there is something called newcomer workshops. Like if you have a group of clients that will be new to NA when they participate, and we do have a piece of literature that they can read, but sometimes they actually want to hear from a live human being. That is a function that public relations can provide. We could do a newcomer workshop where we come on site to meet with them to help them transition to our program. What are the next steps? Well, after the first part of today, excuse me, we will basically be asking some questions of our panelists really at this point, and we will talk about next steps after that. So to begin with, I believe I must have skipped over, let me find our, I guess we read over the panelists. We're done with that. Find some of the questions. The first question that we would like to ask our panelists is, what do you do professionally as far as it relating to addictions treatment? And how do you connect with NA or have relations with NA right now? So I'm going to start with you, Peyton.
Okay, sure. So hi, y'all. I'm Peyton. Professionally, Peyton Wagoner. In the rooms, Peyton W., right? So I worked for over 20 years in long-term residential treatment, primarily for those mandated treatment by the criminal justice system, sometimes in indigent treatment, so that folks who did not have resources could still get treatment. So that has been my primary role. And in the course of that, it was surprising to me how many locations that I worked at that were just basically ignorant of Narcotics Anonymous. Everyone was sent to AA. I'm like, there's another fellowship. So that was certainly a part of my long-term mission, has been to continue exposing organizations to Narcotics Anonymous and promoting it as a valid source of recovery, because there is still some sort of image of Narcotics Anonymous as being the relapse fellowship, or being, the junkie fellowship where people don't really get clean. And that is just obviously untrue. So that has been a big, important part of my my professional journey, has been to share Narcotics Anonymous everywhere I go. And so due to many life circumstances, I have shifted gears for at least the time being from the long-term residential position into private practice, as having been a certified addiction counselor, level 2, for a long time. That didn't quite give me the professional power that I needed in some circumstances. So I went back to school and I got my clinical mental health counseling Master of Science. And I'm really excited to be coming up on my second year at a private practice that specializes in gender, sexuality, and relationship minorities. That has been a big gap in treatment services available to folks who are not cis, who are not hetero, who are in any way their own people. I guess I'll say that. So I'm excited to, while being in private practice doesn't allow me to provide the extent of services that I could provide in long-term residential treatment, it does allow me to expand the range of the people I can work with in a way that doesn't have to be undercover under the table. So I am available and trying to expand addiction services in a different direction. Because everybody deserves treatment. Everybody deserves access to NA. You know, everybody deserves to find recovery, whatever their journey looks like.
Thank you, Peyton. And Reese, I know that you're also working in private practice now. Did you want to?
A little bit.
Okay.
I'm Reese. I've been in recovery for a while. I've worked in the field for over 4 years, and so I'm old. And I retired 2.5 years ago from administrative professional type work, and I've been an addiction counselor since 1986, and so I picked some of those things back up, and you know, I've been enjoying that. I don't do much, I don't want to work much, and you know, I like I said, I'm in recovery, so I still go to meetings, and when I look at professionally, you know, working in this field like I have, and I was also in marketing. You know, so I learned a lot of time at these folks and, you know, those kind of things. And so I had the opportunity to travel a lot in recovery. Like I know a lot of y'all know, recovery has changed a lot in the last 4 years. It's, I mean, a lot. You know, it's where I got recovery at, there wasn't NA. And luckily it was an open area. At least they let us go to the other 12-step meetings and things like that. And then when I moved up to Atlanta, it was everywhere, you know, that kind of thing. It was great. And it gave me the opportunity to learn a little bit of that. And I fell into a group of people in Atlanta, you know, Jimmy sitting out there was one of them. And that I met a lot of good, mature recovery people. And, you know, because I was very immature when I got here. And it took me, what do you think, a little while to get, well, that's even questionable that, you know, how much maturity I had. But I'm grateful for that. You know, when I worked in the field, you know, it was tough because, especially my bosses, knowing that y'all didn't have time that I was in recovery. And my bosses would always put the recovery meetings under me, you know, like Pittsburgh, we had lots of recovery meetings. And there, so they would put those under me and do things like that. And, you know, it was tough because maintaining your anonymity, you know, or trying to maintain partial anonymity. I don't mind people knowing I'm in recovery. That's how people get better, if they know. And so I learned those things. But a lot of times, people that are not in recovery, and people I work with each other, while they were great people, none of the people in my job, the professional part of it, were in recovery. So, you know, they don't think like we do. You know, the primary goal is not necessarily recovery business. And to stay in business, you got to do things to stay in business. So a lot of people didn't understand that. And then one of the good things about it is, now I'm not a doctor, I can't control anything, nor do I try to. But a lot of times, luckily, with me working at different places, people would say, man, y'all put people on too much medication. You're doing these things, stuff like that. And you know, one of the things that Jay posted up, I hope those things are available. I know they are online, but the slides will be available.
Yes.
You know, that I know that with me not being a doctor, I can't tell you what people need to do. But one of the slides was about the number of mental health people that we are affecting as well. We have, I don't know if y'all do, but we have a lot of mental health people that's primary diagnosis is substance abuse, but it's, they have some mental health issues as well. And so learning to deal with all these things and then educating the people on the other side about these things has been hard. I mean, it really has been hard. But people have come around through the years, and the doctors, way back, doctors, especially with psych, they didn't worry too much about substance abuse. You know, they did it, but that wasn't what they were good at, because most of your doctors were psychiatrists, most of them. And so medication was the way they needed to go. So they needed people to come in, addictionologists and counselors and different things like that, and even peers to kind of give them direction about what direction, how do we do this? What's the best way we can do this? And y'all, lots of things have changed over the years. And you know, because people were dying, literally dying because of uneducated people. And I don't need counselors, I'm not you know, I'm talking about a lot of things, but people were dying because they weren't getting the information they needed. And so I'm grateful that I could be a part of it. And, you know, y'all, as I've gotten older, I don't have as much patience as I used to. I'm not an impatient person, but if somebody wants to get better, I'll do anything in the world for you. But if you want to play games, I don't have any desire to play games anymore. I'll refer you to somebody else. You know, it's okay. And it's funny, that's what's happened as far as me doing some counseling, is the majority of people I'm working with are the family members of addicts. And y'all, I'm grateful for that. I really am, because being able to point them in the right direction, and for parents to know, parents or families to know what program would serve their child or their husband or wife best, it's been good for me. I mean, it fulfilled my heart. It's filled my heart. So I'm grateful for that. And I'm great. I think this is a pretty cool thing y'all do.
Great, glad to have you. Lisa?
Hey, good morning, everyone.
Hi.
Hey, are you ready for me?
Yes, yes.
Okay, good morning, good morning. Hey, I'm Lisa Green. In my professional life, around the rooms of Narcotics Anonymous, I'm Lisa G. You know, I was just listening to everyone, and, you know, first I just need to say, I think this is an amazing opportunity to bring people to the table that can help to promote recovery for all. What I do in my professional life, I do a couple of different things. So I've been in the field for 30 years. For a majority of the time, I focused on at-risk teenagers, and then doing work with their family. Right now, I have like three different areas that I work on. So not only do I provide the services for teenagers in the community that are focusing not only on substance abuse, but also emotional and behavioral problems, doing the individual as well as the intensive family work. Also work with the Bureau of Prisons to provide their substance abuse aftercare. They have a program, transitional drug abuse treatment. So I provide their individual and aftercare services for individuals that are currently in a step down, which is like a halfway house. I also provide, I'm a DEIA facilitator for a company out of Seattle, ZLTSS Global. In that capacity there, I work with organizations that are looking to improve on their DEIA work. That's diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. So I provide services for them as well, not only caucus groups, but organizational design, and anything that they need to be on this journey. So it's a lot. It's a lot. You know what, like right now with Narcotics Anonymous, so like I've been clean since 2000. So I've seen a lot of changes in Narcotics Anonymous over the last 22 years. One of the challenges, and I think the young man before me had mentioned, one of the challenges is that separation. That separation, like I know that, like for example, as I'm dealing with Bureau of Prisons, while I'm providing the aftercare services for Bureau of Prisons, we cannot mention any community-based services, but we are able to recommend that when people have left the Bureau of Prison system. So it's like this, trying to find this ever-going balance of like Narcotics Anonymous works for me, but I do recognize as a substance abuse therapist that there are other treatment modalities in place. So right now, what I've been kind of working on, so I'm down in the Piedmont area. I'm in Warner Robins, Georgia. So the Piedmont area is a little bit further south. We have 18 groups in our area. And one of the things that we've been trying to focus on, which like I'm really excited about what I see on this platform today. Like I see the interpreter, I see that it's inclusive. We have the accessibility address, and just trying to figure out how Narcotics Anonymous can show up a little bit different with their inclusivity and accessibility for everyone. So recovery is my thing. I believe that everyone should have the opportunity to recover in whatever way is comfortable for them. So that's kind of where I'm at, kind of what I do right at this moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Thanks for sharing that. So next up, Josh from the Accountability Courts. Are you there, Josh?
Yes, sir. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Great. Thank you for having me. As Jay mentioned, my name is Josh Becker, and I'm Assistant Director for the Council of Accountability Court Judges. That means I work with all of the accountability courts around the state, which we have about 170 of those right now. Our council sets the standards. We conduct trainings and technical assistance. We peer review. Basically, we make sure these courts have the resources they need to operate following a set of guidelines and best practices. So for those of you who don't know what an accountability court is, it's basically alternatives to incarceration for nonviolent offenders. So it provides another sentencing option for judges in the superior state and juvenile courts. This is often for participants or offenders who are identified as having some sort of substance use disorder or severe and persistent mental illness, and of course, in a lot of cases, both. So these courts really aim to get these offenders out of prison, keep them in the community so that they can receive treatment services. They can stay connected with their families or other community members. They can ideally still achieve gainful employment and really give back to their communities. Our treatment providers, we do encourage that all courts, or we require that all courts use evidence-based treatment so that they're using treatment that has been found through research to work with these populations. And as part of their treatment, many of the courts require these participants to attend community support meetings. And even in programs where they are not required to attend community support, they are strongly encouraged to connect with those community support options so that they have that extra support and that extra structure outside of the program, especially once they complete the actual participation in the program. These programs, depending on the type of program or the case, the charge involved, maybe 12 months, maybe 18 to 24 months, and sometimes a little longer if they don't complete it within that time frame. But once they come out of these programs, the hope is that during the program, they have built a structure that they can continue to have that support system outside of, being court mandated. So again, many of our programs do require that their participants attend either AA, NA, or some other community support option. And we, of course, make that recommendation as well. that's a very high level overview, and I'm happy to entertain any questions that you may have now or later.
Great. And Josh, just to point out, like we do actually, Narcotics Anonymous has been having a booth at your annual conference, and you guys have been very great about making that available to us, which has really paid off. That I know that the business cards and how to get automatic meeting information, we've gotten a lot of feedback from your people about that.
Well, we certainly appreciate having you there. We'll be sending out invites for this year's as well. We'll be back to 100% in person, so we hope you'll join us again later this year.
Thanks for your help with that.
Yes, sir.
And Tara, you're there as well?
I'm here. Thank you, everyone, for having us join this important conversation. I'm here on the end of more of the educational. I like to learn as much as I can so that we can help our participants as best we can. As far as me, my background includes, well, I'm a licensed professional counselor in the state of Georgia. I'm also a certified addictions counselor, too, for the state of Georgia. My role as treatment services manager involves overseeing our treatment fidelity program as well as our medication-assisted treatment program. So the information that I hope to glean here today will absolutely be beneficial towards informing some of the decisions that we make. I do have an extensive background in delivering both residential services, where a lot of the women that I served were participants in NA programs, AA programs. And as Josh mentioned, these programs are very beneficial in the success and life, and I like to also say livelihood of the people that we serve as they go on to live lives of recovery. I have also worked at the state level for the Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Disabilities, connecting our courts with community-based resources. So again, I'm here basically as a student. I want to know as much as I can so that we can impart as much as we can on the participants that we serve indirectly through the treatment providers that we indirectly oversee. That's a lot to say, but I'm very happy to be here, happy to entertain any questions that you all may have.
Great, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And now switching over to our third group for the recovery community organizations. It looks like that they're all here in person. I believe that's the case, so we can go in order, starting with Jim.
Okay, so I'm Jen Langston. For this purpose, I'm a person in long-term recovery. I'm also an addict, and I run an organization it's kind of a unique thing where we provide experience-based peer support to people, which means that I use my lived experience to relate to someone and to help them find that pathway that they want to take toward their recovery. You know, like I said, I am an NA member. Our physical location houses an NA meeting that is completely not affiliated with our center. And we strongly practice the traditions in separation of everything we do versus everything that NA group may do. But I do get to share my experience being an NA member with the peers that come in as an option that they might decide to try. So it's very good to me to be able to provide someone with that experience that I have as far as NA goes, but then it's also great for me to be in a position where if someone feels like they're not welcome in NA because of something they're choosing to do for their recovery, then I'm able to provide them with another option that could be just as helpful. I hope that answered the question.
Yes. For sure.
Yes.
Yes, you're next. I'm sorry.
So I'm John Langston, and I too am a person in long-term recovery, and I'm a product of NA, a product of a 12-step meeting, and that is the way I identify when I am in a business meeting. And you know, it's something that was taught to me. As you mentioned, I'm a certified peer specialist for addictive diseases, which comes with an academy called CARES, a Certified Addiction Recovery Empowerment Specialist. It's a 40-hour academy that I had to attend and graduate from there and be able to take a test to become a CPSAD. But in that training, it taught me that, you know, I can speak out loud about my recovery. I'm a product of NA, and I understand the anonymity perspective. For me, that anonymity is more than just being quiet about it. And I think that's something that's very much in my mind is, you know, because at one point in time in this country, if you were an addict, well, that's one of them people, you know, and that stigma that comes with that is still surrounds NA and people that do suffer from substance use issues. And I say suffer because the federal government describes substance use issues as a DSM-5. So, you know, that puts it into a mental health category that is actually stemmed from the stem cells in your brain. So, you know, that's if you go by what the federal government calls something, that's what we suffer from. And to have a stigma around that would be like telling somebody that has cancer, oh, well, you got problems. You need to go over yonder somewhere. And so for me, you know, I've been involved with NA since September 9th of 2008. And you know, it's changed my life, but it's also given me a perspective and getting to see people come in and out of the program that NA doesn't have a hold on the market. You know, AA was smart enough to say, hey, you know what, you guys, we'll let y'all hold on to this, you know, and I'm appreciative to AA for what they gave NA. You know, and I think from my perspective, starting the RCO, Reboot Jackson, and giving people what their pathway is, and enabling them to be able to, just like Jen said, you know, share my experience with them of, hey, you know, I started down that same road that you're talking about going, this is what happened to me. You know, it's up to them to decide whether that's what they want to do or not. They can face that same consequence I face, or they can do something different and maybe have a better outcome. So for me, it's in the professional side of things. When I go into a meeting and sit down, even I do construction work. I have a construction business, and we have several other little businesses going on. When I go sit down in a business meeting, that's exactly how I identify as a person in long-term recovery. And I'll be honest with you, you'll be quite surprised how many people you sit down across that are also people in recovery that you would never have known if you hadn't opened your mouth and said that. But once you open that door, they feel okay that they can tell you about them. And so that for me is just the way I conduct business today, from a business perspective. And it's opened a lot of doors that probably never would have opened. So I'm appreciative to Narcotics Anonymous for what they've given me. So, you know, it is a great, it saved my life, bottom line. So I appreciate it.
Thank you, John. Hank?
So my name is Hank Arnold. I am also a person in recovery. I just celebrated 12 years. Yeah, man, that's awesome, man. And you know, the ability to show up and like be who I am today is a real gift, and like accept who I am and show up for the people that depend on me is a real gift, man. That's a product of recovery. So much like a lot of other people that are in recovery, when I had about 2 years in recovery, I'm like, man, I'm going to get into this professional setting. I'm going to change the world, you know? And I learned a lot. So I started in a lot of different capacities. So I started in a residential treatment model, primarily working with the young adult population, which is ultimately the 17-year-old me, which is a pretty difficult person to work with. And that'll let you know really quickly if you really want to do this work or not. It really will. And I continue to pursue an education down that road. And I worked in a professional setting where we treated a population that were primarily professionals, which is also not my personal lived experience. So I was learning all of this stuff and, you know, continue to go down the road. I'm a certified addictions counselor and a CPS, addictive disease, and a forensic peer mentor, and trauma-informed care facilitator and all of those good things. And I just started soaking it all in. And, you know, what I really missed out on and what I know to be true is that no matter how long someone's in a confined or a structured program, most people are going back home or to some community where they have to learn to live this out in their life. And that's really where the rubber meets the road. And from my own personal experience, I always made an A+ in treatment and I made an F in application. You know, I just never really grasped the lifestyle change component of this. And so what I really was in my heart was to do life with people. And in that professionals counselor setting, the ethical code didn't allow me to do that, which is great. Ethics are fantastic and very necessary. So I pursued this peer support perspective where I really wanted to be a resource in my community for anybody to walk in, a parent of a loved one or someone that you care about, to get resources and understand, but also for the individual that may be even slightly interested in having a conversation about recovery. And what does that mean and what does that look like? And so ultimately what I got to create in my own community was a recovery community organization called Cali the Force, where I could just kind of live out what was in my heart and do that professionally, which is a wonderful thing. They say, what, lost dreams awaken and new possibilities arise, right? Which is a really cool and very true statement. So ultimately what we do is we serve as a resource center. We're sort of the YMCA for recovery, right? We don't bill for services. So we're a no-cost resource, which is almost unheard of these days. And if you look at, in a professional setting, the public health sector for substance use and mental health versus the private health sector, they're worlds apart. The quality of care and services you receive, or if you come from money, are vastly different in the public health sector. It's disgusting. I'm going to get off that soapbox, but it infuriates me. And we have more people have died from substance use in the last 12 months than any other year ever, making substance use the #1 cause of death for Americans under the age of 50. And this is the piece. And so the fellowship looks different now because the substances look different than it did in the 80s and the 90s. In the early 2000s, is that people aren't going to live to get clean when they're 32. They're just not going to make it, right? If they're 21, they're not going to have another 10 years left in them because of what's on the streets and what's being put in. So it looks different. And so I feel like, you know, the fellowship gets a chance to show up different based on the climate and the landscape, right? And that's just my little perspective also. So we do a lot of community education forums. So what we primarily focus on is recovery. We aren't providing a whole lot of information on addiction. We're providing information on recovery. We're providing outcomes and data on recovery because there's not a lot of that out there. You know, once I get to a year of recovery, I'm 66% more likely to get another year. And after I've been doing that about 5 years, less than 15% return to substance use because it's become a part of my lifestyle, you know? And so we educate people on things like that. And so we educate our community on how people in our community that may not struggle with addiction can show up and support people in our community that are struggling. So we do all kinds of stuff around stigma reduction, around education, and direct peer support services. We are in our county jail 4 hours a week. I do an education and support group in the county jail. We also provide yoga in our county jail 2 hours a week, which is really providing that service for a population that probably would never like explore that as an option. And I know that sounds crazy, but we're trying everything. You know, and our county jail doesn't even allow Narcotics Anonymous into the jail, but they allow us into the jail, which is wonderful. We also have an account set up where they can email us. We're probably getting 35 emails a day where we're able to connect to public defenders. Our public defender's office in Coweta County has over 300 active cases per attorney. If that tells you the capacity that they don't have to show up. And so a lot of what we're doing is connecting these dots We're helping people formulate a plan before they're going to court. If substance use is their primary issue, we know 10 years in the penitentiary is not really going to help them. And so we're helping them formulate a plan to show up for court and us to advocate for this plan. And we're able to like see people like through a process. We're meeting people where they are, and everybody's unique and different. You know, if they don't have the appropriate environmental or home support, that's a risk factor, you know, those sort of things. And so we're exposing people. And our relationship to 12-step meetings and Narcotics Anonymous is we provide a space at our facility for NA and other 12-step or any other recovery-focused meeting to take place in our place. And a lot like Jen and John, we're real clear, like we aren't affiliated or related. And so that's a conversation that we have. And being a person in recovery and a member of Narcotics Anonymous, I do not attend NA meetings where I work, just to keep it real separate and clear, but also to be able to provide, hey, if you want to get well, these are the options that are available in our community. We also do not duplicate services, so we're not competing with any other service provider in our community. We were intentional to do sort of a needs assessment in our community, so to speak, a listening session to find out what wasn't there and what would help. And we were intentional to create what we do based on what wasn't already there, so that we're not competing with. So we're collaborative, and we're just pretty open to whatever is going to work for the individual and whatever is going to help that individual get into the solution and maintain their recovery and their wellness.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We definitely going to have some questions.
Okay.
For everybody. That's
Okay.
for sure. I did notice that Andy Maddox was online. Andy, are you there? Just listen. Andy. He's unmuted. He's unmuted. It may be that we need to move on, come back to him. But he's the public defender. Might be important.
He's there.
Yeah, it looks like an audio issue. Oh, there's Andy. Can you hear us, Andy? You can? Do you want to try to log back in? We'll come back to you. Okay. Thanks, Andy. So coming back around, we would like to find out how is NA doing in dealing with your clients? What issues might be that you might be aware of? Starting with you, Faith.
Sure. NA is helping my clients all the time. It's all about developing, like has been mentioned, a connection and a support structure and a way to find out that there is hope, right? Like being a person of long-term recovery myself, it's not just enough for me to say to my clients, hey, I've got 25 years clean, so you can too. Like they're like, yeah, that's not real. So to be able to say, hey, here's a way to find other people, a way to connect, a way to learn about recovery and see other people at every stage of recovery. You know, it is, I love that part of your stats about education improvement, because, you know, among my friends, it's like, don't use and go to meetings, don't use and go to college, right? Like it's all about a bridge back to life. And that Narcotics Anonymous is right, I live in like the boat of my recovery through all the other areas of my life. And so I try to support, encourage, educate, inform clients that they can find a way to experience all the things they want in their lives and be supported through that. And that it is always possible to do all of the things if you're connected, if you're supported, if you know that there are people who believe in you even when you can't believe in yourself.
So Peyton, hi, my name's Rowena, and I noticed that you have the mental health qualifications and also LISA as well. And in a recent workshop that we did, we had some specific questions about mental health and addiction. And one in particular was, is there any specific mental health language or terminology that we should be aware of as Narcotics Anonymous public relations people when presenting to professionals? And in particular, what language should we use that would be easier to clear up misconceptions among clients about medication and mental health?
About medication and mental health. So some pieces of, there's so many parts to that question. Great question, or series of questions. Let me see what I can do with that. You know, medication-assisted treatment can really help people get some traction. And there are folks who have had just relapse after relapse after relapse who, through whatever their circumstances are, find it very hard to establish even that beginning piece of abstinence. And it's impossible to build on abstinence until you get some. And so, an understanding that there are a variety of medications available to help people find recovery, and there are a variety of medications available to help people maintain their mental health. And so I think an important piece to be aware of is that not all medications prescribed are intoxicating, for example. That there are medications prescribed for maintaining stable mood, and that there are medications that are different, right? Like, so, for example, SSRIs, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. So those work on the neurotransmitters in our brain to help us process serotonin and to be able to maintain a more stable mood. Now that is different from one of the medications that are considered medically assisted treatment, right? One of the things like Subutex, or even going old school, like, oh, it just went out of my brain, but the one that makes you throw up if you drink alcohol. Right, thank you. I'm like, where did you go? Every day is a game of charades. So like, there's different levels of medication, different types of medication. And as far as when people start counting their clean time, I think it's a very personal decision that needs to be made between a person in recovery and their sponsor, rather than a fellowship or even a governing body. Some people start their clean time while they're still incarcerated because they haven't used during that time. Other people manage to use while they're incarcerated, right? So, but some people say, oh, it's not clean time if you're still locked up because you can't use. Right. So, you know, I think that there are just a lot of factors, and to encourage folks to ask whatever questions that they have of their mental health professionals, of their criminal justice advocates slash, you know, people who are managing them for whatever reason that we hope are advocating. So to really ask as many questions as you have. Substance use disorders are diagnosed based on whether they are impacting the quality of life. And so a lot of people want to say, oh, well, you have a substance use disorder, you are an addict. Well, but I'm fine. Everything in my life is fine. I'm like, you're mandated to treat me here. We are not on a date. I'm not sure how that's fine. But, you know, to just have as many questions as you have. What does it mean to be on this medication? How does this particular medication impact people's ability to drive, to work, to function? Is this a medication that is going to help them long-term? Like some people take methadone forever, right? And some people don't start counting their clean time until they quit the methadone. If I'm not your sponsor, I'm not telling you when your clean time starts. You know, whatever it takes for you to find joy in your life, to function, to be able to avoid legal consequences is something I value in my life. Right, 25 years without a felony. I celebrate every year. So I don't know, did I answer your question? I gave you a lot of answers. I don't know if they were to your question.
You did, and I know Lisa is also the mental health person, and I'm wondering if you have also noticed any ease of anxiety-related meeting attendance through virtual meeting attendance, like whether you or Lisa have noticed that among your clients?
Well, you know, thank you. That's a great question. I want to go back and just add on to the young lady before me. You know, because substance abuse became part of the mental health continuum, and in order for individuals to seek treatment, a lot of times they have to have that mental health diagnosis, but they also have to have another diagnosis to go along with it. So a lot of times we just have to look at them separate. Like, there is no way, if we are talking something on the depressive, disruptive mood, any of those diagnoses there that will require the medication for someone to stabilize, like we should never touch that. The one challenge that that I always run into with medication for mental health is when we're looking at the medication that's given for anxiety, or the medication sometimes that's given for ADHD, because then we're talking about a stimulant, which then can be misused. It can be sold, it can be a lot of different things. And if we're talking about anything that's in the anxiety, like the Xanax and things of that sort, then we're talking a whole bigger problem. So I always encourage anyone that I'm working with that has a diagnosis, and if they have a history of substance abuse, that they are really working with their provider, with their medication provider, their psychiatrist, to know, first of all, know about their history of substance abuse. So, because as a provider, I always have to be careful that someone's not seeking medication. You know, when we're talking about the stimulants, and especially the anxiety medication, and some programs I've worked in, they're individuals like Bureau of Prisons. Bureau of Prisons won't allow anyone to receive ADHD or anxiety medication, because those can be misused. So I just wanted to add that in on that part there. But as it relates to your second question, I believe, which is, do we see the anxiety with the virtual platform? Is that was your question? Am I right?
Yeah, do we see it reduced? We had some reports at a recent public relations event that there are some NA members who had a much higher success rate of bridging into NA meetings when they started virtually, because of the social anxiety of in-person meetings, at virtual meetings, and attending those seemed to actually help with transitioning into the program and face-to-face meetings, because their anxiety was less in a virtual setting. So we wanted to know if you had experienced that.
You know what, I think that, and again, that's a great question. And so, like, for me, one thing that coming through and trying to navigate and move to the other side of all of the COVID restrictions, when we went to the virtual platform, not only for Narcotics Anonymous, but also in the therapeutic arena and everything, technology showed up and it identified that the virtual platform breaks down many barriers, not only the what for me is the accessibility and the inclusivity for individuals that are able to make a meeting because all they need is their phone or a computer, or like you said, the anxiety of being around a lot of different people. So we've had people like, so we have this challenge because I think that everybody's just so over COVID. You know what I'm saying? Everybody's over COVID. It's like, let's just all be back in person. Let's just all come back. And I think that as far as being inclusive and being accessible, that we have to recognize what technology taught us over these last 2 years, that we have people who fare better on a virtual platform, because if they get anxious, they can turn their camera off. They have the accessibility of being able to move around. Moving around is an accessibility function that is not always looked upon kindly. In an NA meeting, people are expected to sit down and not provide distractions. As far as accessibility on a virtual platform, being able to get up and move around is another part of the inclusivity and the accessibility. So I think that it helps for a lot of different, reasons. Like I said, a lot of times, you know, coming out of organizations or dealing with certain organizations, then a lot of times it's like you have to go over all of the treatment modalities that are available. But NA provides a unique opportunity for recovery, whereas people are placed sometimes amongst like-minded peers, and sometimes amongst people who they have to learn how to grow and deal with. And that's why we offer them the traditions and the steps so that they're able to do that. But yeah, we've got to look at the mental health. Has always been a big part. I remember being in meetings where people were like, oh, you can't take your medication. And it's like, yeah, we can't tell people not to take an antidepressant if they need it. If that is going to help them to, show up and be able to participate in their recovery, they have to take the antidepressants, the mood stabilizers. I've been in meetings where people came in unregulated in their emotions, and there were threats of physical harm because they were not on their medication. Those things will teach you that NA cannot say that people can't take their mental health medication. Now, Jay provided some good information about the new material on the MAT. And that's gonna always be a different area for Narcotics Anonymous as well. So I could talk about NA all day, so I know I'm all over the place, but I hope that I answered your question in some way.
You did. And Reese, want to weigh in on that question?
Well, yeah, I'm going to relate personally to this because it's two-parted for me. You know, what Hank talked about, the medication on the street is so much different. And, you know, about 15 years ago, I had to be put on some medication, some chemo type medication. And the doctor said to me, we need to put you on an antidepressant. Now, my old teaching said, oh, no, I can't do that. And it wasn't about a month later that I completely lost it. And because that old 12-step teaching that you had complete abstinence almost killed me. And luckily I was working with some open people that just take the medicine. It's okay. You know, that kind of thing. And so like I said when I talked before, I'm not a doctor. I can't tell people what they need to be on. I don't ask you if you're on high blood pressure medicine or anything like that. That's your opinion. It's like what you said between you and your sponsor. And I realized years and years ago that things like methadone, Suboxone, and stuff like that, if it saves somebody's life, I don't care. It's not, I have no opinion about that. So, and could I work with somebody like sponsor? Absolutely. I could. I'm not telling people they need to. I could do that, but there are things out there for a reason. And y'all, I do know that as a person has suffered with some depression and some anxiety and stuff like that, and I'm not on medication now, but I have been on medication. And I don't know when somebody needs to be on medication, but I have watched people, because one of the things I learned early on is when I got in recovery, all of a sudden I started vibrating, because I didn't have anything to change the way I felt. And the whole reason I used drugs the way I did was to change the way I felt. And then all of a sudden I'm feeling, and my fallback is drugs. And, so now what do I do? And what Narcotics Anonymous did for me was introduce me to a program of 12 steps. So I have the opportunity to work through these things. But as I had some recovery and worked with open people, I realized, because y'all, I used to say that the voices in my head would, and I'm not talking about schizophrenic voices, I'm talking about our 6 and 7, step 6 and 7 voices. But they would tell me how sick I was. If I worked this program right, I wouldn't have some of this despondency. I wouldn't have some of this anxiety. Some of that stuff was normal. Right. And in working the steps, it took care of a lot of it, but some of it didn't. So I had to seek outside help. And it's tough for me, because sometimes people come to me and say, because I have been a professional, is, what do you think about all these people on Suboxone and, stuff like that? And I say the same thing. I just don't have a lot of opinion if it saves their life, because y'all, and like Hank alluded to, so many people are dying. Yeah. If it saves their life long enough for them to grasp a hold of the other avenues of recovery for them, I'm all for it. If they're using it the way their doctor or whoever prescribes it says, that kind of thing.
Yes. Hey, Andy, I see you back online. Let's see if we can unmute you.
Yes.
Hey, there we go.
Yeah, I apologize. I am wrapping up a jury trial, and I am actually in the judge's office, and I was using a foreign computer, and now I'm on my phone, so we're okay.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you for taking the time out. We really appreciate it. Yes, we understand that your current capacity as a public defender, and we wanted to ask, what your experience has been interacting with Narcotics Anonymous and any challenges that you've had with that.
I don't really have any instances of challenges. I've been with the public defender's office up here in Hall County for a while, and specifically for the last 9 or 10 years has been the primary defense attorney from our office in what we call Alpha Track. Initially it was called Probation Track of Drug Court in Judge Deal's courtroom. And so I've had a lot of participation, and obviously in drug court weekly, and have had a good bit of participation, AA, NA, kind of the combination of two. Our court, I think, works very well with NA. I've never had any problems. It's required as part of the drug court program, and then as a public defender, particularly these days, there's so many alternative sentencing that we're beginning to develop that we highly encourage people that have any kind of substance abuse issue or charge that is directly related or tangentially related to substance abuse to immediately participate in those programs. And I'm fortunate enough up in this area to have people like Reese Daniels and Mr. Argo and many others that we can reach out to and to kind of make sure we're guiding people, and then also into residential programs. So our relationship has been well. It's like everywhere else, you need more and more opportunities and more options.
All right. Thank you. And thanks for going to that effort with the audio. We really appreciate it, being a part of it. Good luck with that jury.
Well, they just declared a mistrial. It was 11-1 for a not guilty verdict. So it's kind of a tough day for my side, but that's okay.
Sorry to hear that, man.
It's okay.
Joel?
Yes, I sort of have two questions, and I'll try to speak loud so that people in the back can hear. Peyton mentioned some ethical issues. Sometimes it cause sort of boundaries that we have to keep if we're professional. I say we because I wear a professional hat in Florida as well. The question is, what can we do to help overcome those for professionals? And the RCOs, without those restrictions, are there still challenges that Narcotics Anonymous can sort of help with to overcome? So.
I don't know that I understand how to answer that. Can you say some more words?
Okay, we have ethical boundaries, we have a code of ethics when we are working as therapists, medical field as doctors as well. So there's certain things we can't do. I think that's part of the reason why recovery coaches have got certifications now, because they don't have that. However, being a person in recovery who's a therapist, and you talked about going into private practice, which gives you a little more leeway, what challenges do you still have? And then the RCOs that ask, are there still challenges if you don't have those ethical issues? So does that help?
I think so. So more of my challenges, at least for me personally, with those boundaries, while in long-term residential treatment, were less about maintaining any kind of secrecy about recovery and more about maintaining other hidden identities, so that they was not able to provide a role model or to provide a welcoming, available person who is knowledgeable about more than is sort of the party line of addiction treatment in the South, right? So now that I am in private practice, my husband was like, I didn't know we were going to be quite this out, right? But like my practice, right, publicized me and put, I'm like, I'm out on Facebook, I'm out on LinkedIn, I'm out on all these things. So that not only can I now be out about being in recovery, because that was never something that was a problem in treatment centers here in Georgia, in my experience anyway. But nobody wants to know that their employee, right, is pagan or kinky or polyamorous or, right, like any, like queer, right, bi, like none of those things that can be just as supportive, available, helpful for clients to know that it's okay to be who you are and still find recovery. I worked at places that required clients to say the Lord's Prayer at the end of a therapy group. And I'm like, no, right? This program is provided state funds. This program is not billed as a religious program. Like, you cannot do that. And I'm like, well, they do that at AA. I'm like, this is not AA. So for me, part of the ethical boundary issue has been that I think it's important, like I said, right? Like I may, identify she, her, hers, right? I may be, a cisgendered white woman, but there are other statuses and identities that aren't visible, that it is just as, if not more important, to be able to say, to be able to have present, that I wish I could have been less undercover, right? So somebody would know me from the rooms, who would know somebody in treatment, who would be like, it's okay to tell her that you're freaky, right? But whereas in private practice, it's like, yeah, wave your freak flag, we're all good over here.
Yeah.
So that, I guess, is more of, that is my answer. I hope it answers some of what you're asking.
It does. Thank you for sharing that about private practice.
Yeah, it's a different animal. It doesn't, like, I don't think that I will always stay in private practice. I do see myself doing some sort of parallel where I can work with folks who can't pay private practice fees, right? The practice that I'm at doesn't take insurance. And there are limits to how many sliding scale spots I'm allowed to have, though I fight hard for those, because it is necessary. So, you know, I want more and more acceptance, accessibility, visibility of who people are, instead of having to say, well, here I am at my work, right? You can only see what you can see, and it is, you know, hopefully socially acceptable.
Thank you.
How about the RCOs
Yes.
part? Did they get it this week?
Can I,
That's,
can I say
Did you
something?
that's
understand?
next.
Yes. First, I want to say that, like, we definitely have a code of ethics that we have to uphold, and we have to have boundaries with the people that we serve. You know, I'm never going to sponsor someone that comes into my organization. I'm never going to tell them where I live. You know, that's just, I mean, unless they're in recovery for a long time and we happen to be on a service committee or something like that, you know, I'm not gonna, a lot of places won't Facebook friend their peers. So we definitely have that, you know, professional relationship with the people that we work with, just not just for our protection, but for theirs too, because we're human and, you know, we make mistakes. And so we don't do that. But, you know, I will say that it's very freeing to be able to just be myself in any setting. You know, my community that we live in, they made me the Citizen of the Year. And I got to go up there and accept this award and tell them, you know, hey, 9 years ago, I was in jail and you guys just made me Citizen of the Year, because I can be out about myself and I can be authentically me to any person I talk to. I just don't tell them how I got there. You know, I just don't say, I went to this NA meeting and I'm an NA member, because that's for the protection of the fellowship, you know, because what if I relapse and then someone says NA doesn't work? You know, I'm not wishing that on myself, but it is like this immense freedom in that, and getting to tell people how I got where I am, you know, as in I'm in recovery, and that's why I'm not shooting heroin anymore, and that's why I'm not, you know, stealing your checks, and you can do this too. You know, let's figure out how you want to. And I think that's another component of the RCOs that I don't get to do in NA, is that, you know, I get to really individualize with someone what their recovery is going to look like, you know. And like Hank was saying, that they take yoga into the jail. Like, we have people that meditate. I call it dog beds. Like, they sit on these little dog beds and meditate, and they do their meeting, and that's their only thing they do for their recovery, you know, formally. And they're doing just as great as someone in NA, and they're doing just as great as someone that attends therapy. And, you know, so everybody gets to pick and choose those little pieces that they want to work for them. But yeah, it's just such a different experience to be a peer to someone, and not in a sponsorship capacity, but to be able to say, you know, like, this is how I got through this. I'm not telling you what to do. I'm not making a suggestion. I'm just sitting here with you while you figure out what you want to do. And then I'm going to keep holding you accountable for what you said you were going to do. So it's a lot different. Yeah.
Okay, before we move on, we're going to finish with the RCOs, but please don't forget, hopefully this conversation is stimulating some questions that you guys can go ahead and write them on the index cards as we go through. You don't have to wait till the end. Just want to encourage you so that you don't lose things that pop into your mind, but please go ahead, John.
So a couple of things as far as the ethics. I know Hank and myself and Jen, we've all three been through the CARES program, and some of the biggest parts of that training are ethics and cultural competency. Those are two of the biggest parts of that training. So as far as, you know, we're not necessarily HIPAA regulated, but we hold those same standards as RCOs. That's part of our integrity, which recovery has taught us, is to hold integrity. And to add, you mentioned something a while ago about the different diverse groups that you work with. And as the president of our board, we have some peers that are part of the LGBTQ community. And they came to Jen and they were like, hey, we want to start a meeting. Has Reboot got availability for us? Jen looked at the schedule, see how she could arrange it for them to have a meeting. Sure, you can have a meeting. They made them a flyer. It was all rainbowed up. I mean, it was bright. They threw it on Facebook. One of my board members called me and they were like, what in the world are you doing? And I was like, I got into the 21st century. I started me a Facebook about 2 days ago. You know, so when they said, you know, y'all plastered this all over Facebook. I hadn't seen it. You know, I didn't know what they're talking about. But he began telling me, well, he's a member of a church fellowship, and some of his members of his church contacted me like, hey, aren't you on this board? What in the world? You know that is against our beliefs and this, that, and other. And I was like, look, dude, I said, let me explain something to you. You've never been a substance user. You have told us many times you don't understand us. You can't understand why we do this or do that. Where if Jen's in the room, I know her kind of what her thinking is because she's an addict and I'm an addict. So I can understand her and I can relate. He said, yeah, I've said that. I said, well, that community, I can understand their substance issues, but they deal with a completely different realm of issues than I deal with because I'm not part of that community. I don't fit into that demographic of people. And he said, I've never thought about it like that. I said, so when they go to this meeting, it may be for substance use, and that may be what draws them to it, but they can discuss what they want to discuss because it's not a specific NAAA, it's an all recovery meeting. Okay. And they can discuss what they want to discuss. So yes, the openness of being able to maneuver off the curb, if you will, and get up on the grass is beautiful for an RCO. It gives us a lot of flexibility to be able to help. For me, anybody can get clean. For me, it's how do I help them maintain that and to become a person in long-term recovery. And so if I have to jump the curb and get up here on the grass as our organization to make that available to somebody, that to me is recovery. Is them being able to feel whatever that spot is that they're having issues with that could potentially make them go back out in the street. And just like Hank said, what's in the street today, that's enough to keep me from going back out there. You know, it is. So anyway, I just wanted to hit on those two things.
Okay.
I know a lot of professional certifications and licenses in their code of ethics say, hey, you do not self-disclose unless it's going to benefit the person that you're working with. And so, and I get that, right? But that's by no means meant we didn't have an ethical code and standard. We do, but we come from a lived experience perspective where that is where we're sitting knee to knee with someone, we're identifying, and it always is about the person that we're serving, obviously. But I don't look the way I looked 12 years ago. I don't present the way I looked 12 years ago. I don't talk the way I talked, you know, and so people will sit across from me and say, you ain't got a clue. You got no idea where I'm at. You're wearing khakis, dude. You know, you don't know me, you know, and it's not about who blew their life up the most, but it is like, hey, you know, I do have these lived experiences and I do identify with the spot you're in today, you know, and so being able to leverage that relationship, because it is about the relationship, and being able to foster some trust, right? To be able to know that that individual can walk away from an encounter saying, that dude cares. These people care, and I trust this organization. I trust like this person that I just had this encounter with, and maybe that's the first shot of hope that I've had, you know. And one of the things that I also know is that when I first found recovery, there was one way to do it, and it was the way I was doing it. And if it wasn't that way, you were doing it wrong. And I think that served me well for a time, you know. And then I got exposed to like people that recovered differently than me, and I was like, y'all aren't doing it right. You know, I think that comes with experience too. And so I learned along the way that and so for me, from our organization and other RCOs, multiple pathways to recovery, and that because I did it this way and it worked well for me, I've been coming around this fellowship for 15 years before it started working for me, only because I wasn't willing to participate, right? And so I don't want to, I just want to make the doorway as wide as possible, right?
Right.
Because at times, sometimes it feels like very narrow. And so we just want to just take all the reason why you can't and do away with that and just say, this is all the reasons why you can. And so, you know, but we also as RCOs and independent nonprofit organizations have the flexibility and the autonomy to do things that are going to serve the recovery community where we live, which is really incredible, and we can be creative. And so most professional licensures and certifications are focusing on the disease model of addiction. Right. Addiction is a disease, and the literature talks about it being a disease, but it also talks about it being spiritual in nature. But a lot of what we do also is social interactions, activities. And one of the things that was so vital for most of us is just finding our tribe. Right? I had a tribe when I was using, and I was always accepted in that tribe, always, you know, and being able to find a place that feels like home and my people, you know, and so we're creating that community and helping people find their voice and their footing so that, you know, I really like what you shared. It's easy to build on abstinence once you have some. And it's really tough to build on something that I don't have any previous engagement with. Right. And just, you know, we provide a safe space for people to have their own experience. And it's not up to me what that end result looks like.
We have a follow-up question for this. The RCOs are available Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. People walk in the door, call you. Is that how it works?
Organizations have different sort of hours.
Okay, so they're independent.
Yep, they're independent, and they have their own policies, procedures. All that stuff is unique to that specific organization. While our place is open 9 to 5 Monday through Friday, we have something every evening, recovery oriented, and every day of the week, even when we're not there. They're trusted group members that hold or facilitate meetings. So they have a key code, they have an alarm code that's specific to that group, and they're able to use the facility because it is a nonprofit community service organization. They're able to have access to our space to do recovery oriented activities or meetings. So, but each RCO they come up with what is right for them and what works for their schedule.
Okay, that's true.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and you know, our organization formally has peer support services between 9 and 5 Monday through Friday. Okay. But we do, just like Hank, allow the NA meeting, the all recovery meeting, anybody that has any activities that they're doing at our organization to come and go when they need to. But there are 38 RCOs across the state of Georgia. So they're all autonomous organizations, and I believe there is a map of the RCOs on there's a website, the Georgia Council on Substance Abuse has an RCO map, so you can find one near you if you have someone that's interested in those services.
So I wanted to ask, what are some of the biggest issues that clients mention about resistance to coming to NA?
Ooh.
The MAP program,
We,
What program?
somebody being on medically assisted treatment. And for me, they come into the rooms, and I'm fortunate enough to have been in some rooms where they were accepted. What I saw as the issue was people questioning, well, that's really not your clean time because you're doing medically assisted treatment. And you know, it took me a long time. I had to do a lot of research and a lot of studying and a lot of self-examination on John to make sure where I stood with that. And you know, the NA literature talks about, you know, that psychiatry and medicine wasn't enough for us, you know, but it also says that the only reason that you have to have is a desire to stop using. And when it comes to someone being on, I've watched people go through, we work a lot with accountability courts. In fact, that was when we started the RCO, we started in our home doing individual check-ins, and we would do a couple a week. And it grew, and I went and talked with the judge over the Piedmont District and told him what we wanted to do and who we were going to work with. And he gave us an opportunity. And he said, you know, do a group with this group of people. And I've watched the accountability court peers come through that are on medically assisted treatment and go to NA, and they feel attacked. Bottom line.
Sure.
That's my fellowship.
Yes.
You know, so that was a hard pill for me to swallow. But I've also seen them go and endure through it and come out the other side of it and are still in recovery. They may still be doing the MAP program. They may not be. But I'm like Reese, I'm not a doctor. I'm not going to tell you what you need and don't need.
Right.
You know, for me, if they're not out here on the street with potentially taking a fentanyl laced pill and ODing and dying, okay. I'm not going to tell you that's not recovery. So from that perspective, being a member of a program and hearing that from people that I work with, that I'm peers with, yeah, that's a hard pill for me to swallow. It just is.
You know, I've heard a lot of the mention of evidence-based. I heard it from the drug court people. And I'm also wondering, in terms of evidence-based, do you guys do your own collection of tracking from people who attend NA or on MAT and go off? Do you guys collect any of those types of statistics? And I'm also wondering for the drug court people, if they've noticed a reduction in recidivism through NA meeting mandation. And because this is, you guys mentioned about the business model portion, business metrics, and I'm just wondering, have there been any collection on your part in terms of NA post-up meeting attendance, any of those kind of bridges with collecting that data that would be helpful to us from a PR perspective?
So NA to me is an anonymous program, so we do not collect the names of anyone that attends that meeting. We will have the chairperson write down a number of people that were there. That's just so we can justify our rent and our light bill and that sort of thing. But no, we never collect names, or we don't even ask people, do you go to the NA meeting? We do collect data on people in accountability court as far as, if they're coming to our center, but I don't believe that someone returning to use means they're not in recovery anymore. So I'm not going to track their, if they return to use or if they had to go back out and come back or anything like that. I know our accountability court does keep up with the recidivism rate. So if someone is rearrested, then they keep up with that, but they also don't keep up with like relapse rate or anything like that.
Yeah, so I think too, like, because each organization is autonomous and they're unique to their communities, again, like Jen, we don't have people give information or do research on people that are coming for anonymous programs. Also, I want to say this and be really clear, like RCOs are not a clubhouse. Right. They are not an adjunct to treatment. They are not. So there's some misconception, I think, around what is a recovery community organization, what is not. So it's not just that. But another piece that we do, like we provide a space for programs or anonymous programs to meet and have meetings. But like on our side, like what we do, like we're doing linkage to education. If you want to go back to school in college or a technical or get your GED, we're providing that sort of linkage. We're providing budgeting. We're doing childcare. We're doing, if you have a DFACS case plan, we're walking with you through that DFACS case plan and like helping you in these next steps. And I feel like there's a little confusion on like what we do. But I'll also say this too, within the accountability courts program in Jackson County, they have a medication assisted treatment program in that accountability court. Okay. Our accountability court in Coweta does not have that. So our contact with people that are on a medication to assist them in their treatment isn't nearly the population that Jackson County has, just based on their location. They're really close to their accountability court. They're on the same street. Mm-hmm. And they have a MAP program within that accountability court. And our community does not have that. Okay. So again, it's specific to the communities that you serve.
Josh, are you still there online? Would you feel comfortable weighing in on this?
Yes, sir. I'm still here. And I'll, and of course, invite Tara to speak up if I don't cover everything. But as the gentleman just pointed out, the MAT availability and usage varies pretty widely around the state. Medication assisted treatment is written into our standards. We require, programs are not supposed to reject participants based on their prescribed use of MAT. That's a nationally researched best practice, and we mirror that with our standards. So for a participant to be eligible for a program, they should not be declined participation if they have a prescribed a prescription for MAT. You know, we do see that there is, I think, as has already kind of been mentioned, some resistance to MAT. I think that's been around for a long time, and people, you know, still get pretty hung up on old views of what medication assisted treatment is and how it works. And you know, that's kind of come a long way since I've been doing this work, where we have gotten our judges, attorneys, you know, a lot of prosecutors and law enforcement as well, to be more accepting of medication assisted treatment, to better understand what it is and how it works. There's still a long way to go with that. I know that data collection was brought up as well. We collect an immense amount of data from our accountability courts, but we're not at that granular level just yet. We are collecting some MAT data now that is and Tara might have to remind me, it's either has been added to our case management systems or is being added as part of some coming updates. And we do have recidivism tracking as well, but we wouldn't be able to parse out at this time, you know, okay, this person was rearrested, were they attending NA, and did they have, you know, a prescription for MAT? So we're not at that level of specificity just yet with our data collection.
Yeah, Josh, I just wanted to clarify on that. I mean, I know that in the state of New Jersey, they have 5-year mandation to Narcotics Anonymous meetings in their drug court program, and they have been able to track recidivism in that respect. But I did want to just clarify if you guys collect any data, you and also the RCOs, on who attends Narcotics Anonymous meetings, or the numbers of attendance, not necessarily identified by name, and how those people fare with staying in recovery regardless of what clean time is.
So our case management system, again, so we've got a couple of case management systems that our programs use, but there is a a section within that system where they can enter community support meetings. That's not at this time a required data element for our programs. Our required data elements are more set by statute. And again, we've grown our data program immensely over the last several years. CACJ has been around since 2015. So every year we've been requiring our courts to collect more and more data. So, you know, there is a place within that system to enter community support. However, it's not a required data element at this time.
Thank you.
So we do track like numbers for like meetings, just to know like how many people are coming in the building, just for our information. And then also looking at like the fluctuation between like attendance, especially like during COVID and people like not being there. What could we do to better support the groups that are meeting in our place and accommodate, making it safe and those sort of things, especially during times of COVID. But we don't necessarily track. Now we do track data on people that we may do an individual coaching like session with, or may have like, we have more of a relationship, but we have some people that just come to our space to attend the meeting, and that's great. But then we have people that are taking advantage of some of the other services that are available in that building, and we will track those specific pieces just so that we have 5 people on staff. There's like a little note that we do in our own database where we will just give a little blurb about, so that if somebody else is working with that individual the next day and I'm not there or I'm tied up, they can always go back to the data and just find out like what was our last interaction, what time, what day, and what was going on with that person. But nothing specific to Narcotics Anonymous.
I'd like to add to that, along with what he said, nothing specific to any group. I know at Reboot we do an accountability court check-in group on Monday nights. We do an NA on Tuesday night. We do an all recovery Wednesday and NA on Thursday, all recovery Friday, NA Saturday, and AA on Sunday. All of those groups total in 2021, there were 13,279 peers that attended those meetings. What's NA, what's AA, what's all recovery, I can't tell you. But that's the numbers that I know I can give you that is data backed.
So piggybacking on what you're saying and what you said earlier about unfortunate situations with people on MAT coming to Narcotics Anonymous, and I've done a number of MAT, DRT, NA workshops. How does NA fit in your organization? Being that you have all these other fellowships that are meeting there, how does NA fit in? How does NA work well or doesn't work well in that setting, in that community? Can we do something better to make it, because it's somewhere someone said something about, I think Hank said it, we try to make it as wide a community as possible so that everybody seeking recovery can get recovery. So how does NA fit in that picture, and how can we do better?
I don't know that it's NA's fault that those people feel that way. It could be that if Jen comes in and she's on the MAT program and I'm an NA member and I'm like, oh, well, there's that girl that's on that MAT program. She doesn't have to not come. That is her choice. And I think that goes back to some of what we were discussing earlier with the mental health things. And if that makes her feel unsafe for being there, for her to take care of her recovery, she probably won't be back. And that's just a win-loss factor, I think, in the NA program. Whether it's right or wrong, I'm not to say. But as far as NA, how it fits into our organization, the NA group that meets at our facility is one of the largest groups in the Northeast Georgia area. I would almost say the largest group in the Northeast Georgia area. So it has all ranges of clean time. There's people that come in through the accountability courts that have 1 day in recovery. And there's people there that have 25, 30 years. So it's a broad spectrum, just what was said earlier, seeing all age groups of recovery in that one meeting. So it fits well with where we are in Northeast Georgia.
I feel like too, it's like, you know, the longer we stick around here, the more mature we become in our recovery. And, you know, have I gotten to that love, service, and tolerance piece? Have I gotten to that part within my own journey of going through the process and going through and just sort of experiencing like what recovery continues to offer us? You know, I know that because each group is autonomous, there's a certain atmosphere of recovery in every NA meeting that is kind of the same, but it's kind of unique to that specific group, right? I feel like the home group I showed up at in 2010 was specifically catered and made for me. I don't know that I wouldn't have had that same experience at another group because of the group members and because of the spirit of recovery and because of the love, service, and tolerance and sort of like that group's conscience about how they accepted people. And so that's a group thing. I don't know, NA as a whole has wonderful literature on mental health, on medication-assisted treatment, times of illness, all of that sort of controversial stuff, wonderful literature. And it's done a wonderful job of providing information. I think too, in a professional setting, a lot of times it gets misconstrued because if you have, it's a benefit to have members that also work at places because they can educate their coworkers. But if you don't, they just think they're looking at it from this medical perspective, and the completion of whatever said time mark is oh, we're doing great. You find that person in a year and see if they're still doing well, right? It is a piece of the greater whole. And so I think Narcotics Anonymous, the biggest piece is like, how can NA show up and be a part of the solution and work collaboratively with other modalities or other places? And NA is NA, right? It is. And so I don't think you can compromise like the integrity of the fellowship, but also the only requirement for membership is a desire to stop using, right? But you still have to maintain an atmosphere of recovery in meetings. And it's hard. And I have learned, like, mainly by doing it the wrong way, like the way to have conversations with members or the way to present myself publicly outside of an NA meeting. And I mean, I think that comes with growth and maturity of our members and of our fellowship as a whole. But for us, like, we have our area service committee meets at our place. When there's an activity the NA does, they meet at our place. You know, we freely like do that. The state convention is in our area this year, which we are really excited about. And so there's been some some convention fundraisers that's taking place at our place. I think it works well. I think we work really well with the fellowship.
You know, Hank, I was really fascinated when you said that you guys go, I think, 4 days into the prison. Narcotics Anonymous all over the country has been having tremendous problems with getting clearances. And I wanted to know what channels allowed your organization to get into jail, but perhaps you could let us know.
Persistence.
Okay.
Persistence. It was like almost a year.
But well, let me just ask this though. Was it with the DA? Was it with the governor? Like just with the courts themselves?
Georgia prisons, they sort of have a clearinghouse you can do. There's a training that you can do through the state, but each prison has its own set of policies, and it really depends on, quite honestly, the relationship you have with the administration.
Okay.
That's really what it, and so, but jails are different. They're autonomous as well and operate in what they feel is going to be best for the population they serve. So a lot of it is just like continuing to knock on doors, continuing to show up, continuing to educate folks on what services you offer and like what that looks like. And I think a lot of it is in the presentation and in the relationships that you can foster within those specific organizations.
So you went to a jail specifically?
Yes.
And worked in administration?
Yes, for like 9 months. And they quit answering my emails. And so what I started doing though, was what I could do. And then I started sending them outcomes about what I could do. So I couldn't go in, but I could we could get an account for the kiosk to email people. And then we could, even without them letting us in their facility, we could still have a connection with somebody in that place and encourage them to come see us when they got out. And then I could show them like long-term outcomes. And then that sort of started to change their perspective on who we are and what we do. Also, another issue is like consistency. If we say we're going to be there on Sunday at 9 a.m., like we should be there when we say we're going to be there.
Yeah.
And that's another reason why like our jail won't allow a lot of other agencies to come in or organizations, is because of the lack of consistency historically.
So you're small, you've got fewer people, but you've got more, more control over that consistency.
Well, we just, if we commit to it, we do it.
Okay.
I mean, that's just the bottom line. If we commit to doing it, we just do it.
So that you're saying that at first you opened up the possibility of doing email with inmates,
Yes,
and you did that through a kiosk?
yes, jail ATM. And most prisons now can't even, or jails now don't even receive paper mail. It's scanned in and it's coming to them electronically on a kiosk in the pod. Yeah, JPay or jail ATM, yeah. But you can do an inmate lookup and you can send a message to a specific individual and you don't have to have the consent of like the administration.
Really?
Really.
So on that same vein, this is probably the last question before the break. You know, Narcotics Anonymous virtual meetings in some cases are 24 hours a day. I know that in the Long Island area, they actually counted 1 million unique IP addresses attending those meetings within the last 2 years. And they also mentioned there's about 40 treatment centers that come onto that meeting platform. So I'm wondering, do you guys avail yourselves in any format or way of having the virtual meetings available during the day, or making that virtual meeting information available, or having clients log on? We also have international participation from about 7 different countries online, and also LGBT meetings and so forth. So I'm wondering, do you use that as part of your social media? And I did go on the website for all you guys, and so I noticed you do use social media pretty effectively, but what about any virtual meetings?
Yeah, we have a virtual NA meeting every day at noon during the week, and it's very well attended. And I found that it's not just people that have COVID issues or social anxiety, it's also people that are at work, and they can turn their meeting on while they're at work and listen and participate and not have to leave work, drive somewhere, you know, make sure they get back to work on time. So it's been very effective. In fact, I have some staff that are like, can we do this meeting in person? I'm like, it's gonna fall off if you start doing it in person because nobody's gonna come. So yeah, I would say we probably have 60 or 70 people a week come to that meeting. And it's grown into its own like little atmosphere of recovery. Like it's the same people and they have a relationship and they share. I hate virtual meetings. I'm not doing it, but it's great for an option.
You're not right in the heart of Atlanta.
No.
You're a little bit more rural, so you're getting
Yes.
that's a good sign of participation, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
We're gonna have a break in a few minutes. We first wanted to let you guys view a video that we put together for this event. Actually, some other people helped us with this that are on our team, technical people.
Do you know someone with a drug problem? In our addiction, we could not manage our own lives. We could not live and enjoy life as other people do. We had to have something different, and we thought we had found it in drugs. We placed their use ahead of the welfare of our wives, our husbands, and our children. We had to have drugs at all costs. When at the end of the road, we find that we can no longer function, either with or without drugs, we all face this dilemma. What is there left to do? Either go on as best we can to the bitter ends, jails, institutions, or death, or find a new way to live. This is a simple, spiritual, not religious program known as Narcotics Anonymous. We are a fellowship of men and women for whom drugs had become a major problem. We are recovering addicts who meet regularly to help each other stay clean. Our program is a set of principles written so simply that we can follow them in our daily lives. Anyone may join us regardless of age, race, sexual identity, creed, religion, or lack of religion. We are not interested in what or how much you used, who your connections were, how much or how little you have, but only in what you want to do about your problem and how we can help. Anyone who reaches out for our help is entitled to our compassion, our attention, and our unconditional acceptance. Any addict, regardless of clean time, should be able to pour out his or her pain in an atmosphere free of judgment. Most of us have found that we are able to feel great empathy for those who suffer from our disease precisely because it is our disease. Our empathy isn't abstract, nor is our understanding. Instead, it is born in shared experience. We greet each other with a recognition reserved for survivors of the same near-fatal catastrophe. This shared experience, more than anything else, contributes to the atmosphere of unconditional love in our meetings. Narcotics Anonymous, as we know it today, began with one meeting in 1953 in Los Angeles. We grew slowly for decades, reaching 77 weekly meetings by 1973. But then, we came together and wrote our book containing the foundation of the NA program, The Basic Text. We experienced rapid growth, first in the US and then worldwide, especially as we were able to translate our literature into more languages. Our members, groups, services, literature have all continued to evolve over the years, allowing us to reach more addicts in more places around the world than ever before. Today, Narcotics Anonymous is truly a worldwide, diverse, multilingual, multicultural fellowship with over 70,000 weekly meetings in over 100 countries around the world and growing every day. We are well established through much of North and South America, Europe, Australia, the Middle East, New Zealand, and Russia. NA communities continue to grow throughout the Indian subcontinent, Africa, and Asia, and our meetings are hosted in over 90 languages with literature translated in over 50, and more translations are on the way. All of the efforts of Narcotics Anonymous are inspired by the primary purpose of our groups. Upon this common ground, we stand committed. Our vision is that one day every addict in the world has a choice to experience our message in his or her own language and culture and find the opportunity for a new way of life. And what is our message? Our message is that an addict, any addict, can stop using drugs, lose the desire to use, and find a new way to live. Our message is hope and the promise of freedom. When all is said and done, our primary purpose can only be to carry the message to the addict who still suffers, because that is all we have to give. We carry our message of hope and promise of freedom so that no addict seeking recovery need ever die. We are Narcotics Anonymous. For more information about Narcotics Anonymous, please visit us at na.org. The faces of NA members were blurred for their anonymity. Any face not blurred in this video was from a licensed stock photo and was not a member of Narcotics Anonymous.
There is some coffee and snacks. Not that long, but you might get them.
Oh, yeah.
How long before we come back?
20 minutes. Meeting in progress. Okay.
You're live online.
Everybody got a nice break in. We're ready to start back the professionals roundtable. Now we get the fun part. It's not too late. If you have a question that you would like to write down, there are still some index cards up here in the seats at the front that haven't been used, so it's not too late. But thank you if you already did write a question for us. We're still taking them up here. Welcome to drop them all. And we are going to now start reading them and answering them. All right? Who would like to go first?
Yeah. do this for counselors. Randy did, brought this question up. Any medical assisted treatment for drug replacement therapy, we have our, literature on it. The question he asks is, do clients complain about not being welcome in NA meetings? And I know that it was mentioned before, but in any other settings?
Yes, I have heard that, absolutely. A discomfort, and it depends on, each fellowship has a culture, and then each meeting has a culture. And there are like the old school recovery, where it's all like grow up or die, motherfucker, is not conducive to what is more younger people on the medically assisted treatment, because they are doing these drugs that are so highly addictive physically, that have the physical impact, that they need that medical treatment to help get away from it. And yeah, I've definitely heard more than one client, and just also with my experience in the rooms, that people feel rejected, shamed, and disenfranchised.
Anyone else?
I would say for like my specific community,
Yes.
in my experience, a lot of the clinics that are providing this medication may need a little more education, right? And that requires, like, I think showing up as a committee and dropping off some information is great, but I think maybe making it once a month thing, that I stop by there and that I am consistently showing up and providing this information. So I think that could really help in education on providers, because they're looking at it from a medical perspective. And, we know that recovery is a lifelong journey, and so I think with them being armed with that information would certainly maybe help them refer people. And a lot of times I'm working with people, I'll go get the NA pamphlet on the new pamphlet and walk people through sort of meeting etiquette to try to educate them on how to, what that looks like, and I think in times that we can do that, it lets people like go in and sort of, feel their way through the fellowship and see what feels like home.
Does everybody know the pamphlet that he's talking about?
Thanks for that input. Well, I just want to add one thing for Randy that asked that question. Is I've done a number of the MAT-ERT workshops within Narcotics Anonymous. And what was very interesting, the last one I did was at the Florida Regional Convention. And we had a couple of doctors in there, okay, who were one of us. And what they said, what it came down to is that because it's an IDT, a discussion topic in terms of what we're going to do for maybe another piece of literature, that the piece of literature should really be about welcoming anybody, rather than, because we don't have an opinion. Narcotics Anonymous has no opinion on medical assisted treatment. It's an outside issue. However, we can do better at welcoming people, because I'm hearing from that. And it just supports what I heard in some of the workshops. So thanks for that input.
I think one thing too is the steps is what saved my life, is what helped to change my life and deal with me. The traditions, I'm working through them with my sponsor, and the traditions are teaching me how to deal with you. And I think that's something that, what was said a while ago, work the steps or die, motherfucker. You better, or you will. But as we grow in our recovery, we also have to learn how to deal with the public and deal with other people. And I think that's something that each individual group with their own autonomy has to learn, just what you said, how to deal with that newcomer coming in the door that may be on the MAT program.
One of the reasons I bring that out is that I got clean originally in the 80s in New York City, down in Greenwich Village, block from a park that was basically Needle Park. And when I got clean back in the 80s, there were 6 years you were a guru, right? And people in the front were smiling, people in the middle were sort of like me when I first got there, not sure if we needed to be there, wanted to separate ourselves from you, but we didn't really want to admit we're cowards over our drugs. And then they're the ones in the back that were still using the bathroom to shoot dope and drink our coffee and eat our cookies. We didn't throw them out.
That was me.
We didn't throw them out.
Hey, Josh and Tara, do you guys have any feedback for us that you hear from drug court participants about NA trying to fit in or come into our meetings?
I have not had any particular feedback, negative or otherwise, regarding individuals going or receiving any type of kickback regarding the NA meetings. I think Josh summed it up best when he stated that we don't necessarily keep account of what meetings our participants go to, but the social support that NA, AA, and any 12-step group provides is essential to what we do as a part of drug courts. So, and I just wanted to say, coming from or doing the MAT work, statewide MAT coordinator with our accountability courts, some of the feedback that I've gotten just in general from drug court participants, and maybe something to the effect of MAT, which of course it is not FDA approved. And the response is that, well, neither is heroin, but you know, that is. But as far as NA, I think that what you guys are doing as far as educating the public and making yourselves available to participants that we serve is phenomenal. Just wanted to put that out there.
Thank you, Tara.
Yeah. Yeah.
And a follow-up to Hank, if you ever would like help to go to those clinics that do MAT treatment in Coweta County, or if we can, if there's any way we can help from Georgia Regional PR, we would love to be a part of the solution.
Thank you so much, and we will absolutely be taking you up on that.
Thank you.
You know, I do think when we look at what NA can do for us, sometimes I think about what can the individual in NA do. And I think about people that do feel uncomfortable, and it's my responsibility as an NA member in long-term recovery to pay attention to what's going on in the meetings. And if somebody's struggling with, if I see it, and if somebody's struggling with something, if I'm not reaching my hand out, I'm at fault. You know, so I have a responsibility of this too. You know, because y'all, NA gave me the way, taught me how to live, and so I need to pass that on. And if somebody's feeling uncomfortable, what can I do to help with that? Now, granted, I can't do that for everybody, but you know, I have a responsibility.
And your question is for Jen, what's for supper?
Yeah.
Stop it.
All right, we'll move on from that.
So one of the questions had to do with the peer support specialists at RCOs, and I'm kind of combining the question. Someone wanted to know if patients are saying, or clients, that NA meetings trigger them to want to use because of what they're hearing. Are your peer support people responding to that, or does the RCO itself kind of respond to any misconceptions from NA, or do you just kind of keep that boundary there?
So I personally have had people tell me that they don't want to go to a meeting because it makes them want to use, and like the NA part of my brain is like, that's just their excuse to not want to go to a meeting, but that's not. But I will talk to them about, you know, what exactly did someone say that made you feel like that? Because as an NA member, I mean, we shouldn't be being drug specific in our meeting, and we should be focused on our recovery and what the solutions are when we're sharing. But, you know, sometimes people do have that burning desire, and they do have things that they need to get off their chest and they need to share. And personally, as a peer support person, you know, I have to have them look at that. You know, if that's something that's causing you to want to use, what coping skills can you use personally to help you get through that? And, you know, because let's be realistic, like I go in the gas station and there's beer there, you know, that doesn't mean that I go get one. And I had to learn how to cope with that and how to deal with it differently. But, you know, it's a tough situation when someone says that going to meetings makes them want to use, because I've never experienced that in my time of going to meetings. But I also think it depends on, you know, the group and the individuals in the meeting, and, you know, empowering that person that feels like that to say something to the person that said something that made them feel. Does that make sense? You know, because, you know, we are helping people learn how to be autonomous and stand up for themselves, and, you know, how to be empowered and how to talk about what they're feeling and take ownership of their recovery.
So a lot of it too is like, I kind of encourage that person to maybe look at like, what are you there for? Like, what is your personal motivation for being there? And like, who are you hanging out with? And if there's a specific group that you may not feel comfortable with, let me share like this website, or let me give you a meeting schedule. You know, in certain meetings, we have a meeting in our area that is primarily folks that are in their 20s. And all these folks have 3 to 7 years in recovery. And so when I have a 20-year-old and they're coming to my home group, which I'm like a young member at my home group in terms of age and identification, right? It's a very different experience than going like the next city over. So a lot of times I'm having a conversation, I'm referring them based on my personal experience. And I'm even able to call somebody, a male or female that I know is a member of that group that's in good recovery, and say, hey, you know, Jen's coming to, I'm calling Nicole and saying, Jen's coming to the meeting tonight. She's never been. Would you mind meeting her out front at 7:05? You know, that sort of stuff. And so that is a way like we're able to sort of identify like where that person is, you know, and that sort of stuff, and guide them to a group that not only are they going to like identify with like the age group or like whatever place in life, but also is like a healthy group. But I mean, I don't know. When I was 2 days clean, I thought about using in a meeting and not at a meeting, you know? So, I mean, I just thought about using, you know? And so a lot of that is sort of helping them like understand like, what is that?
Do you hear youth wanting to be with their peers, like
Yep.
youth wanting youth meetings?
Yep.
You hear that? Okay.
Or just the identification part,
Yeah.
you know? I think it's really powerful for a 22-year-old that's thinking about getting into recovery. I think it's really powerful for them to be around a 25-year-old that has 4 years clean, and that peer group, because that's a really powerful thing. But I also know a 16-year-old, they got clean at a group that had all the members were 40 plus, you know? So, I mean,
But people do, it does come up.
sure.
Okay.
Yeah, sure.
I think another fellowship, well, I think AA does have some youth meetings. I was going to mention that earlier. Someone brought up about dealing with families. I think Lisa G online, you mentioned it, and then you might have mentioned it. I'm not sure if you mentioned it, but dealing with family systems, I was just curious if you refer people to Nar-Anon, or if there are enough meetings with Nar-Anon, whether or not that's working as a solution.
There are not nearly enough Nar-Anon meetings, so usually I refer them to Nar-Anon, Al-Anon, and Dakota. I'm like, among these things, hopefully you will get enough meetings. There are not nearly enough Nar-Anon meetings.
And that's, we actually had a Nar-Anon meeting at Reboot up until last month.
Yeah.
But that's one thing I like about the all recovery meetings. All recovery is for an addict. It's for someone with mental health issues. It's for a parent that has a child or a spouse that may not do any kind of substance, but it's all a form of recovery, hence all recovery. So, you know, you may be in the meeting and Jen being a substance user and ain't never done any drugs. And I'm in there with mental health reasons. And, you know, it's all a topic of discussion based on whoever's willing to say, hey, this is what I'm going through. And so that kind of opens up the family dynamic into a group setting.
Another challenge with Nar-Anon is that word is awfully close to Narconon. and Narcanon are Scientologists. So sometimes people try to find Narcanon, and then never look back.
Okay.
Been there on the spaceship.
Lisa, are you there?
I'm here.
What, do you have any input on that issue about, for the family system getting help?
You know, I'm sitting here and like it's a lot of information. And I think as I'm sitting here, I'm just thinking about there's always some things that's going to be missing from any continuum of care, especially where you have a program like Narcotics Anonymous and where it fits in at. But I think that what I'm more focusing in on is the inclusive piece. So we just talked about the identification of the younger addicts. We talked about the need for families to find some type of support system. With the identification, you know, I have individuals now. See, again, it's probably based on where we are. I'm down in the South region, so definitely our little small area is not as progressive in their thinking as up toward the Atlanta way, where our region is at. But, you know, like I've had people who can't find a meeting because they're Spanish and there's no meetings that have interpreters or Spanish speaking meetings. I've had individuals who don't feel, I've had individuals who don't feel comfortable because in our area, even though the only requirement for membership is a desire to stop using, in our area, we still have all white and all Black meetings. So therefore, it's this need to be inclusive. I heard the young man from the RCO mention, you know, the step word, that's that I work, you know what I mean? But Narcotics Anonymous is the we work, where I think that Narcotics Anonymous can learn to show up differently, not only in the area of MAT, but also in the other areas that focus around our diversity. Diversity is our foundation. The bigger the base, the higher the point of freedom. I think that Narcotics Anonymous has a lot of opportunities right now because our world just changed. Our world has changed in the last 5 years. Our world continues to change. I think that I'm sitting here and I'm listening to the conversations and I'm just focused on how can we show up different? How can we show up different and be that force that we know works for so many individuals? Narcotics Anonymous will be here long after any of us have left. Narcotics Anonymous will remain, but Narcotics Anonymous has to learn to grow to reflect the changes in society too. So that's kind of, you know, Jay, I'm sure that didn't answer your question. I kind of got caught up on the solution. You know what I mean? Looking at what the solution needs to be for the families, for the young folks, for the LGBTQ, for the people with accessibility issues, for the Spanish speaking people, what's our cultural challenges. And I think I'm just really focused on what the solution is. I know we're going to talk about some next steps at the end, and I'm just excited about that. Thank you for asking that question.
Yeah, Lisa, I have a follow-up related to that because Narcotics Anonymous does have special interest meetings you're talking about, but as professionals, would it be helpful for you if you guys actually had breakout meeting lists that were separated in that way to make available to your clients? Because in Narcotics Anonymous, I think it's easier for members to find those meetings than for professionals to have access to those meetings. So for example, and I know virtually there are entire areas and zones that are Latin American, Hispanic speaking. There are several different virtual meeting platforms for LGBT, trans, non-binary, also a bunch of other places in Narcotics Anonymous that are more racially diverse. So I'm wondering, as professionals, would it be helpful for you to have meeting lists that were breakout in that capacity to refer members? We also have an entire region, the South, in South Florida, there is an entire accessible needs that's actually doing our American Sign Language portion right now. They have an entire committee that is dedicated to addicts with additional needs. So would that be helpful?
You know what, that would be extremely helpful. And you know, I know that those meetings, those special interest meetings, I know that they exist. I'm looking at where I'm at. They don't exist where I'm at. So right now, the clients I deal with, they're where I'm at and they don't exist. We have none of that. We have none of that. We have nothing like that. So it would be helpful, especially if it is being held on a platform that would break down the barriers of people being able to participate, such as a virtual platform for people, because I'm sure that other progressive, whether or not they're progressive in nature or not, there are other areas that offer some of the services that are not offered here. So I think that that would be helpful, but another step with that would be even more helpful and more accessible would be if that list was given to the areas for them to post on their website, because we do have a helpline, but that information is not necessarily generated. So if we can find a more comprehensive way for that information to be disseminated to the people that need it, yeah, then that would be amazing. That would be amazing.
Can I just jump in, Lisa? I would be remiss if I didn't mention that, because we have actually heard about some interest in your area of starting a Spanish-speaking meeting. And the only one that's really going that I'm aware of in the whole region is in North Atlanta, Nuevo Amanecer. They're still meeting virtually. So while that may not sound like that directly helps, I do think that joining that community would at least be a good experience, a springboard for people to really figure out what works, what they like, what they don't like, so that they can consider starting one where you are. And I did put it in the chat.
Okay, great. Thank you. Because actually that does help, because we can give that information out down here. If something exists and we don't know, then does it really exist? You know what I mean? Like if the information is not provided for anyone to access it, like down here, then we don't know. I'm gonna grab that information out of the chat. Okay, I have it. Yeah, I'm gonna grab that. Jay, thank you so much for that.
Sure.
So I wonder about how much outreach connections there are between NA and the various, not just individual treatment providers, but the educators, right? Like at my grad school program for clinical mental health counseling, Master of Science at Georgia State University, there was a 3-week addiction class. That was it. And you know, there was nothing other than me saying, hey, there's this thing called Narcotics Anonymous. And there was an assignment that everyone needed to go to a 12-step meeting, but certainly not anything about go to more than one or go to more than one fellowship or go to, you know, this is what these codes mean. Because, you know, on all of our meeting lists, we've got all these secret codes for us.
Oh, yes.
Right? It's a closed meeting, it's an open meeting, it's a speaker meeting, it's a discussion meeting. But people who are not within our subculture don't don't even know to look, where to look on there. What do these codes mean? Does an open meeting mean that anyone can come and learn? So I wonder, that it just seems like that could be a space of increased outreach between clinical organizations, clinical individuals, and Narcotics Anonymous, to be reaching out to all the various higher educational institutions in Georgia, as well as the conventions, right? Like I've participated and I've seen NA, like at GAR events, and at Georgia Association of Addiction, or Georgia Addiction Counselor Association events. I've only belonged there for 20 years. I don't know what's called. You know, but what about the ACA event, right? Like there are various conventions that meet regularly that it seems like we could have more of a presence at. And part of, right, we say, we've got a tradition in NA about anonymity at the level of press, radio, and films. And some of, you know, y'all may have noticed some of us using some slightly different verbiage from just saying, hey, I'm Peyton, I'm an addict in this context. And instead saying, you know, I'm a person of long-term recovery. And what that means to me is that it's been 25 years since I've, you know, used any substances. And so that's the verbiage promoted by the Georgia Council on Substance Abuse. So it's a way for those of us with recovery to identify publicly without compromising our fellowship.
Well, I do want to add that there are also quite a few public relations chair people that are in the audience right now. Some of them have not only done some of these conferences that you've mentioned on a statewide level, but I can also tell you, here's some of the challenges. In Narcotics Anonymous, or public relations are challenges when we decide what kinds of avenues that we're going to work on as committees. We're limited not only by funds. These addiction conferences, there's only a few regions in the United States that can actually financially support these more than one conference, which is why we're trying to combine zones in order to do that on a wider scale. To my knowledge, also Central Ohio Public Relations regularly does presentations to medical interns, and they've done that for several years. But you know what, just like Hank was mentioning getting a champion, it's usually just starting that initial contact to make it a regularly reoccurring thing, which is part of the biggest challenge for Narcotics Anonymous public relations. So the other thing with schools, I've done several presentations to high schools. It takes 9 months to set those up. 9 months, and then they only have really 2 times during the year when they will let you come in after state exams to help classes, you know, because you can't do big auditoriums because of the heckling factor. So when you go into the small classes, they'll let you go in. But you know, it's a real momentum buildup, and I'm not saying that we shouldn't do it. Right. But the other portion that you're talking about, I'm wondering from the RCO and addiction treatment perspective, do you guys try to get your clients into Narcotics Anonymous conventions in groups? I know that that's kind of our job. We have something called HIPIP, which is public information H&I, which reaches out to treatment, and they make convention packages available in a big group package. And I've actually heard in California that they actually have some parolees and inmates who attend their conventions in California, and they've got the jumpsuits on, but they give them shirts. They give them convention shirts. So these things are kind of sporadic in NA, but it's one of the reasons that we have you guys here to try to build up momentum, and hopefully for the other PR people in the audience to understand that there are many other types of opportunities to get our message out. And once again, because the medical community doesn't like when we use this language that they bristle at, it makes it that much more challenging for them to allow us to come in and present.
I could jump in just for a moment. One of the benefits of having you here, the treatment providers, especially on this particular point, would be that actually it did pop in my mind when we were planning this event about approaching the professional associations, because I work with psychologists and mental health counselors in my job, even though I'm not one. I want to make that clear. I'm a computer person, but I do work with them, and I mean, they're great people, but I think that to reach my concern about inviting a bunch, like let's look at this room, and let's say we wanted to have this room be 2 or 3 times this size, and we really wanted to try to fill the seats, would be that we would probably need to offer CEUs and have something valuable to offer them that we are just a piece of, not the dominant force in. And we would need to like take someone like Peyton, for example. It's just I'm just spitballing here, and take like your resume, you know, and apply to get the CEU units because you're licensed in the state of Georgia. And then therefore we could do something like that actually. And so one of the things, and that's just one idea, but one of the reasons about having you here was to kind of, when we get to the point where what are next steps, rather than have like treatment providers, RCO, you know, have you all together at the same time, which has been great. We could also go with a more narrow focus, right? We could do one where we specifically try to reach those people. Like I didn't try that hard to reach those associations. Right after I mentioned it to my staff, they were like, yeah, you know, without CEUs, forget about it. But they just say that. They're in private practice, and their time is very limited. But I also heard about the accountability court evidently have counselors that they need CEU units, and that would be a more specialized thing. But do you see that as possible?
I do see that as possible, actually, yeah.
Okay.
We can work on that.
Yeah, that sounds promising to me, to try to reach them more broadly. And I think the messaging would probably need to be adapted somewhat. When I talk to them, they have less knowledge than you do, Reese or Lisa G, about Narcotics Anonymous, because they're not members a lot of times. But that's where we get into, when we ask them what the challenges are, they'll throw in the God issue, the fact that not just that we're a spiritual program, but the fact that the word God is used a lot, right? So then they want to talk about that. And so it may be that we get into some additional areas, you know, there's some additional concerns, and just like with the MAT, our literature is actually pretty well written in the sense that it does not offend, you know, and then it does include all that language about spiritual principles to kind of deal with those kinds of issues. But that would be something that we could talk about. You would know it firsthand.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I actually just did an in-house training about how the personal beliefs of the treatment provider impact the experience of a client seeking treatment for substance use issues. And we're working on putting that together so that it gets, that it can count for CEs. And it seems like that's something that we could link.
All right. Thank you. Did we have some other questions?
I wanted to circle back around
Yes.
on the NAR9 piece.
Yes, please.
We have a strong NAR9 fellowship in our area.
Okay.
So we have like 3 meetings a week, which is pretty big for a family support service. My home group actually has a NAR9 meeting at the same time as the NA meeting, which is really nice. But again, I mean, that we work really closely with NAR9, and we also refer a lot and just like educate families that this is a support. And they're all 3 very different meetings. Like one of the meetings is primarily like wives of husbands. One of the meetings is primarily like parents of children, you know, and so based on like what their particular situation is, we could say, hey, this meeting is happening at this time and this would be a good fit, you know, that sort of stuff. So I just wanted to circle around to our relationship with NAR9 and how strong it is in our community.
Do you feel like you helped develop that, the RCO? I mean, not you necessarily personally, but
I would say this, a lot of the members that are now in like trusted servant positions in the NAR-9 meetings.
Right.
We had initial contact with 4 or 5 years ago and absolutely knew nothing about recovery.
Okay.
At
We
all.
could invite them if we were to do something with the RCOs. I mean, it is technically an outside issue to NA. It was just one of the topics that keeps coming up, like we're on the
Sure.
helpline.
Sure.
And people, it just come, like you, exactly like you said it, the fact that having a NAR meeting at the same time as NA probably gets more people to both, right? So we're, in public relations, we're looking to cooperate, not to affiliate, but we can't cooperate.
Yeah.
When we have our regional convention, they do, on George, I believe they take out meeting space and meet at the same time at the same location, at least for some of that time. I think it's a smaller, yeah, for over a decade. So there's definitely like cooperation there, that could happen. And I would think that the RCOs, I mean, you have 38 now, it seems like it's growing, that maybe you are a good resource to
Connect those.
Yeah, to connect with them and us at the same time.
Yeah.
And it is growing. We were 17, number 17 in Georgia, and that was in 2018.
So here's a question for you guys. I know 2 weeks ago, we had another professional conference, and one of the treatment providers mentioned to us that it was difficult to talk about their MAT, with their MAT clients, what they could do in Narcotics Anonymous. We have a recovery pamphlet that is in the works for people on medically assisted treatment, and if you could suggest anything that you would like to see in there, that would be of help, because what was revealed was that those treatment providers didn't know they could use other literature than step work with people on MAT. So is there anything you guys might suggest to us to add in that pamphlet, because it's actually still being drafted up?
So you're talking about,
A recovery
are
pamphlet?
you talking
that
about
would
a
be-
pamphlet that's specific for professionals?
No, for people on MAT in
Okay.
recovery, that pamphlet is gonna go into our literature racks, just like we have the mental health IP. We're drafting an IP for people who are on medically assisted treatment in recovery meetings, and we're still trying to figure out as a fellowship, what should we put in there? So if we were gonna post that to you guys, what could you suggest?
I would want to have a little bit more time to think about that,
That's fine.
because I can spit something off the top of my head, but
Well,
I would want to be really intentional with that.
and the way you worded that question, you didn't say that they were in a recovery. You said that they were in recovery. So if we're going to put an NA pamphlet in our racks, is this specific for NA?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
It's an IDT right now, which is a idea discussion topic in this cycle. So there are workshops within the fellowship that are going on this topic. So we're all looking for input so that at some point, hopefully, we can come out with a recovery pamphlet.
So how would that differ from the existing pamphlet?
That's for professionals.
Right.
Okay.
This
So-
would be a recovery pamphlet for the addict.
Okay.
So have you asked this question of NA members that have had that experience?
Yes.
Like I said earlier, I've done a number of those workshops, and what comes out of it is, from what I'm hearing, is that we need to work better on welcoming those members or those individuals that are coming into the meetings that are on MAT. Again, it's about welcoming. I hear it's more about welcoming, anyone's invited as long as they have a desire to stop using it. So it's more about the welcoming than it is about the MAT or DRT in the workshops that I've run.
Well, this kind of dovetails with a question we got about peer support specialists. I know that the other professionals at this conference talked about the idea of sponsoring people on MAT. So the question about you know, how would we answer that as a fellowship? What kind of literature would be used? And I guess the direct question was, how does a peer support specialist, you know, what do they do that like differs from any sponsor? But I guess like, yeah, if we were looking for like the sections of a recovery pamphlet such that we know that, right? And then based on the work that you guys are doing, and listen, we're not gonna hold you to these comments. They're not gonna like necessarily show up on social media unless I post them there.
Well, I won't, I'm like Hank, I won't say anything that I'm not intentionally meaning to say. So you can post whatever you want to, I'll put it up there. But I think twofold with the question. I think the pamphlet on MAT, yes, we get comments from our peers that say, I felt like I was being judged. So that is that peer's feeling. Okay. For me, the first tradition is unity, period. Third tradition is the only requirement is a desire to stop using. Don't say nothing about it unless you're on MAT. And the fourth tradition of being each group is its own little island. For me, my thinking is the brochure should be more aimed to the people in recovery already, that says, hey, remember what built this program. There's unity, there's welcoming people. You can be your own group unless you're affecting NA as a whole or other groups. Well, if people start saying I can't go to NA because I'm being judged, your group is affecting NA as a whole. You can stand by the traditions and sidestep it if you want to, but there's the fact. So for me, the pamphlet not so much being directed to the peer that's coming in on MAT, but being more directed to those of us who have some sustained recovery and should be aware of what has helped this program to survive for 70 years.
And that's a very helpful perspective, because I've also heard some of the treatment people mentioning not to disclose, you know, what their status is, but then this is supposed to be a program of honesty. So then there's that like conflict in terms of self-disclosure versus saying where you're at.
Well, I also feel like too, like Narcotics Anonymous is like, even though we don't have the opinions on outside issues as a fellowship, it is a program of abstinence from all minor mood altering substances, right? Yes. When you got somebody that's not disclosing that they're on a medication, does that person get to chair the home group? Do they get to be the GSR of the home group? Do they get to, and I don't want to get too far in the weeds here, but I think like Narcotics Anonymous does sort of have some real thought and feelings on that. And I think continuing to be inclusive in the spirit of recovery, right? And I also know too that there are a lot of people that fought really hard for Narcotics Anonymous to be its own entity and organization, right? And I don't know.
Yeah, the service commitment aspect absolutely is a big question mark, you know, unless you're like a breeder at a meeting or.
But if the fellowship is welcoming somebody as a whole and they can't have trusted servant position because of an outside issue, you know, I feel like that's kind of a tough spot to come in and feel like I can recover in, right? Just like I'm not, like I'm a second-class citizen. Just throwing that out there. And I know I was at the World Convention in September of 18, and they had an incredible workshop on medication assisted. And I'll tell you, it was some really rich discussion. There were some really, really passionate people, but it was led by two people whose personal experience was coming into Narcotics Anonymous on methadone and kind of seeing that through. And they had very different experiences, and they had very different like methods that they sort of, their journey was very unique and different. So I think getting a lived experience perspective from a member who has that would probably be better than like me, because that's not my experience.
That's good. I also wonder, it's one thing for it to be wrong. Like a lot of those things get enforced on an individual level or by talking to our sponsor or with our higher power. It doesn't seem like that just because we know that that's against the spirit of NA that we necessarily need to welcome people with that mentality. It seems like we could do both. Like it seems like we really could have more conversations about being welcoming, right? Since that's the feedback. And at the same time, because I think the IP does kind of, the IP on it for professionals does kind of do the dance.
Yeah.
Right? Because it is true that what our program stands for. I think they word it very carefully. Another thing I want to point out, the two Craigs over there, we do have some additional resources for public relations at the zonal level. Not just these fine people here who are helping out today, but with Southeastern Zonal Forum, we have like Craig, you're not really called. Oh, yeah, well, Craig they're both Craig, right? Yeah.
Original Craig.
I was starting.
Yeah.
Craig number
In
2.
order of importance, I was starting
Jim
with,
number
no, I'm
2.
kidding. No, I was starting with the one from the Southeastern Zone first, just because that's where we are in the Southeastern Zone, right? And he's available. And then Craig from the Southern Zone, which is really just up in Tennessee, says he doesn't really pay much attention to geography. And he's here today, and they're both resources for us. So when it does concern, like, not having the resources to go to professionals and so forth, we can at least communicate with them, right? To make sure that we're using all the resources that we have available. And we do owe it to them to be inclusive, to talk to them, include them. So I wanted to let you guys know who they are and that they're here, that there are people like that. The next level, depending on whether it's up, below, or sideways from region, would be the zone. So we do have some resources there. Yes.
Yeah, I'd just like to address the issues of net and complete absence and resistance from newer members that are coming in on net. And what my experience and even understanding from a lot of people is that they get angry when they get told that they're really not clean because they're still on medicated assisted treatment. Now, I understand you cannot treat a dead person, and I'm not specifically against medicating someone to help them when they're having cravings and they're going to go out and kill themselves, because obviously we can't help that NA member if they're dead either. So this isn't about that, but it is about when someone comes to a meeting, the only requirement is a desire. If you have a desire, you're welcome to be at the meeting. And what was done in the 90s was people who came in on methadone were told, you're welcome, we love you, sit down, listen to learn, learn to listen. We'll hang out with you after the meeting. We'll talk to you. We'll be with you. We'll carry you until you come off of methadone. We'll support you in that effort. And the members that stuck it through, man, if you ever want to see a room go up, try someone that came off of methadone and then announces that they have one day clean, and watch a room light up and explode.
Wow.
And the feelings that those members got spurred them forward to stay drug-free for long-term periods of time. And now we're at a place where, because it's a mental illness to be an addict, all addicts need to be medicated or take some kind of medication. And that's not true either. And the professionals want people to stay on medications. Why? Because the pharmaceutical industry, the doctors, the psychiatrists, and the treatment centers make money from that, including, and I'm going to say, is recovery coaches too. Why? Because you can say you're in recovery when you say you are. It's okay that you're on Suboxone, Vivitrol, naltrexone. You can say you're in recovery now.
Well, it's up to the individual.
No, it's not, because you're telling them that they can say what they're in recovery whenever they say they want to say it. So no, you're giving them an individual conscience of what your definition of.
You can't actually speak for another person.
No, but no, I'm not. But I'm just saying.
And I don't think you have enough knowledge about what RCOs do to be speaking about what we do either. Because I have never, Reboot Jackson's been operating for 3.5 years. You know how much money I've drawn from Reboot Jackson? $0.
Okay.
I do not draw a check for Reboot Jackson. I do it because I want to help somebody. And if helping them means they can get on the MAT program and not be dead out in the street, you're right, that counts. It sure does.
I agree, and I'm sorry if I made an assumption, because recovery coaching is a profession that people
It sure
can get
is.
paid for.
Well-
So I'm sorry that I made an assumption that you.
Well, I'd like to just add too, and thank you. What's your name?
Joanne,
Joanne, thank you.
and I
So,
took the recovery coaching coach one.
yeah, thank
So
you.
I know a
You
little
know,
bit
so,
about it.
so thank you for your input, and I appreciate all these perspectives, right? So for me, I know what my recovery means for me, and I own my recovery, right? And that has to be my own, right? And yours is your own, and everybody in this room that identifies as being in recovery, it's their own, right? And I don't have the right to tell somebody else measuring my recovery against what theirs is when they're well and in recovery. That is something they have to own, and it's not my position. So I hear what you're saying, and I appreciate your perspective. But I also don't bill for services. I don't. I make $0 off people that we serve, right? And so I just need you to hear that. But I appreciate your passion.
Well, what happens is it creates a disharmony or a disunity, because obviously between the addicts that are being invited into meetings now, there's a confusion when if a person says, well, you're on medicated assisted treatment, and that in our way, complete absence from all mind and mood altering drugs. Naltrexone and Vivitrol are mind altering substances. Suboxone is a mood altering substance. So if they are on those things in our literature, they are not clean, because our program is complete abstinence from all mind and mood altering substances.
But also, we're not.
Coffee and nicotine are mind and mood altering substances.
Well, then maybe we could tell everybody.
So
maybe they're not clean.
so we aren't representing a perspective of in our professions. In our professions, we're not representing a perspective of Narcotics Anonymous. We aren't representing Narcotics Anonymous, right?
But
And
that's where the conflict comes in.
I don't know that it's a conflict. People can choose where they want to go and recover. And if the fellowship of Narcotics Anonymous isn't a fit for them, there are other things that people can try. And so what we do as individuals is try to make that as available to individuals in our community as possible. And so if NA is not it, hey, you know, it says it's a proven way, but it's also not the only way.
Well, I'm not going to disagree with you, but that's the thing is, and from a public information perspective, not to offend anyone here, but we are not a one size fit all fellowship.
Sure.
That's right.
Okay, it's
No, I
not
agree.
not everyone, not NA is not for everyone. And I also agree there are multiple pathways of recovery. You know, before, one of the things that was brought up was faith-based, and there are proven outcomes from faith-based treatment, faith-based recovery, and even as recovery coaches, there's a whole faith-based track.
We're gonna
many
need to
recovery
let some other
coaches.
people speak,
So,
actually.
I'm sorry.
No, it's
but, you know,
okay. Shane, are you online? Did you want to weigh in?
Yeah, I did. Thank you, Jay. Hi, everyone. I'm Shane from Kentucky. I'm part of a work group here. It's doing the same kind of stuff that you all are doing there. And the comment that I wanted to add is that what we have found in discussion about MOUD and other things and the current times is that we are, as a fellowship in NA, is consistently inconsistent in our communication. And I've heard many wonderful comments about the guiding principles that we've had, our foundational principles of group autonomy, and sharing and caring and loving and all these things. And if I had a comment about our upcoming piece of literature, that's what I would love to see, is that you know, each group is responsible for communicating its own conscience on these matters. And some groups feel differently about service positions, things like that. And so I think that was the number one thing that we found in our discussions with professionals all over Kentucky and the surrounding states, and also group members, recovery coaches, the organizations, everything, was that communication really is the key. You know, it's talking about possibly putting designations on meeting schedules for, you know, different alternatives, or something like Wilvina mentioned earlier. And you know, our phone line volunteers being, you know, having that information, you know, because some groups, you know, my group's really progressive for Kentucky, you know, and you know, we have service positions and all that kind of stuff. And I know that a lot of the virtual meetings as well, specifically the one that was mentioned earlier by Wilvina, the NA 24/7 meeting, you know, they have specific service positions for people who are on medication assisted treatment. And I think that we need to be very careful when we were having these discussions out loud about the differences in all types of medications, because we're not talking about all mood or mind altering substances. When we're talking about the differences in approach between MOUD and Narcotics Anonymous, we're talking about a difference in the first step in our recovery, which is coming to admitting that we were powerless and that our lives have become unmanageable. And that's a foundational principle. It's not really a difference of opinion. It's either you are or you're not. And it's okay if you're not. You know, that's okay. But we as a community need to do a better job explaining that when we're having these discussions, because, you know, the mental health medication, you know, pain medication, these are all different things, and they're not the same in our perspective as what we're talking about drugs used to treat addiction. We simply have a different approach on how we treat addiction. And so I just wanted to be clear about that. I appreciate you all giving me a second, and I don't want to take up any more time. Thank you.
Thank you, Shane. There was a question online from Maud. I think this one, in terms of accountability courts, do they exist in North Carolina? I honestly think we could probably do that one offline. But there is also, Joseph has been making tons of comments. Joseph, did you have a question for us?
I guess not specifically a question. I think that there is some excellent work out there being done. I'm glad that these conversations are being had from a RCO and peer recovery support services standpoint. I think Narcotics Anonymous has its work cut out for us in our committees in way of communication. I think it was said by Shane earlier that we need to be consistent with our communication, and that is something that is lacking. And hopefully with some of our literature that is coming out, we get a little bit more solid foundation to, you know, come from and get unified on in our approaches to educate our communities, because there are a lot of recovery community organizations that, you know, we could build stronger communities with, but there is that miscommunication, misinterpretation, and still to this day, clinicians are still being taught to point people away from Narcotics Anonymous, and that's unfortunate. At least here in Austin and in Texas, the peer support curriculum was being taught there. And in Austin at the college level, there was a specific emphasis and approach around students supporting other students that are in recovery. And so having those collegiate approaches as well. Nationally, we're starting to see a growth of recovery community organizations, collegiate recovery programs, recovery high schools, alternative peer groups. So more and more people are entering tons of different pathways of recovery. And from a state standpoint, more and more efforts, federal dollar efforts are being put into recovery and recovery support. And I think that it's our opportunity to partner with and grow as a fellowship and grow stronger as a fellowship. in alongside with those organizations.
Okay, thank you for sharing. I'm glad. Thank you for all the nice comments too. And Josh and Tara, they have put the answer for Maud's question in the chat about North Carolina's recovery courts. Did you have that question?
This comes from someone in the audience, and go ahead, ask it.
So I'm not named Craig. And look, I personally appreciate everything that's stand up. I am standing up. Speak up. That joke, but
Yeah, that was good.
so I'll stand up. So I appreciate the opportunity that we're having here today, the dialogue with each other, because I think that's what helps. And when we're listening to each other and understanding different approaches. So 2 things before I ask my question, if that's okay. Is that okay?
Go ahead.
One thing is that from my perspective in being involved with public relations in different service bodies over multiple years, right? But I remember this experience in Maryland where I served as a public relations chair for the Free State region. And we set up a conference with the governor of Maryland, Governor Hogan. And because he had it on his website, click this if you want to talk to me. So of course, no, you just gave me an opportunity. So one of the things that we met with his representative and he said to us is that we understand from our clients that come out to your meetings, the NA's opinion about medically assisted treatment and those kind of things. And as that dialogue that was going on, people are not feeling welcome. And that's your opinion. And what I responded back to him is that you probably talked to an individual member, that might have been that individual member's opinion, but that's not the expressed opinion of Narcotics Anonymous as a whole. Right. Okay. And that I went on to explain our approach to the disease of addiction, which is abstinence and the 12 steps. That's our approach. And that's going to differ a lot of times from other approaches. And that what we have to do in not just informing and educating, and not only Shane was mentioning being consistent in our communications, but we need to be clear in our communications. And when we're speaking with different organizations, and we need to make sure that we understand, for example, when you were talking about someone in long-term recovery, I think that's the term you use, that someone identifies themselves. So my first question in my mind was, why? You see, and so I think that kind of dialogue to understand why, and then to understand why I personally identify myself as an addict and what that means in relationship to our first step, and that kind of dialogue so that we can better cooperate and collaborate together to make sure that people get clean, whatever way they choose to. One of the things that I know is that Narcotics Anonymous can't be everything to everyone. That's not who we are. That's not my experience with who we are. So it takes that kind of, I think, communications and dialogue, even with employee assistance programs, because we established a relationship with the University of Maryland. And I think someone mentioned the educational opportunity that we have. There are a lot of opportunities in the southeast part of the United States that we're missing, that we need to intentionally work to find those opportunities and strategically find those opportunities where we can develop approaches and those kind of things. But my question after all of that was, Peyton, you mentioned a person gaining traction and abstinence building on abstinence. So my first thought was, while that person is gaining traction, would they still be expected to go to meetings while they're gaining that traction? Because you talked about different ways that traction is obtained. and then them being able to build on that abstinence that traction led to. So does that mean they still go to meetings while they're doing that, was my question.
Well, I think that that would depend on some things. For me, I would certainly encourage people to go to meetings, always. Partially because that has been obviously wildly successful for me in my experience. And part of my own recovery has been being a member of Narcotics Anonymous and utilizing 12-step meetings to connect with, find support, learn that it's actually possible to recover. And I mean, the term expectation, I'm not sure who that would be coming from, who the expectation would be coming from. But I would definitely encourage anybody seeking recovery to try us out, right? NA is not for everyone. AA is not for everyone, right? There are so many options today. There are so many options of different types of peer support, different peer groups, if you will, right? There's Buddhist paths through recovery. There's REBT, right? Smart recovery. There are like different options. So that if this is not a model that works for everyone, they don't have to stay, but I hope they'll try. I hope they'll try, because sometimes it is just about going without something that we believe we must have to live for a few days to realize that we can live without it.
Okay, George, did you still have a question?
Well, whenever you're ready, bud.
Okay, go ahead.
My name's George, I'm an addict.
Hey, George.
Hey, George. I'm currently one of the hats that I wear, public relations chair in Northeast Georgia area. And very blessed to know a lot of them personally. And so just had some observations before I asked my question. And you know, when I got here, I walked in the door of Longwood 2002. Okay, on a Wednesday night, we're here with Health Group right up above the psych ward in Daniel, at the hospital. Right, first meeting I got to when I got, I got the game. 2003, I came back in, picked up my last white seal, been clean ever since. Right, when I got here, I wasn't trying to do what any county said. Okay, I wasn't, them people up there, they're different than me. I'm unique. Well, if I didn't have a commitment tomorrow night here, I'd be in Macon tomorrow night dressing like Monique. So I'm just saying, that my behavior isn't really cookie cutter. Okay, and I think as my experience with dealing with people that are professional in recovery and people who do PR, H&I, service work all through the fellowship on all kinds of levels, there are no cookie cutter results, just like there are no cookie cutter actions. What happened, what worked well and gainful last year might not work in Jonesboro this year because everything's constantly changing, right? And I feel like I must shy away from making generalizing statements about large groups. Like they don't do this, that ain't gonna happen. No, if I don't go knock on the damn door, it ain't gonna happen because hell, there ain't nobody there. There's nobody at the door. Why don't someone come open the door? If I don't go ask to come in, why would anybody let me? What my question is what can public relations do to improve our standing and what the things that we do? I met Craig, I met Wilhelmina online. They do a tremendous amount of service work. I met Joe, I met Ramon, I met the other Craig, I met him in person. but anyway. We're from all over the place, and we all put, we've all put a lot of different efforts in, okay? None of us do it exactly the same way, but the reason we all ended up together was one, the pandemic, and two, nobody's covering our fucking service position. And regardless, I need to know what tools you're using, find me, because if you're just going to your meeting schedule from your area, well, you know, okay, right now I'm the administrator of that meeting schedule. I need to know what you're doing online, how you're searching, what's working for you, what's not working for you. Maybe that's my job. Maybe I'm failing in not giving you some kind of a damn survey in your email, but it's coming, I promise. You know, and if you don't answer, I'm gonna talk to you till you do. But, you know, what can we do to, you know, because in my experience over the years, even my first sponsor, who was from my home, from the town I grew up in South Georgia, Nevada, my first sponsor, he used to say, there's no long-term recovery in narcotics. No. Bullshit, lies dead. You know, I remember about 15 years ago, I was going to a meeting down in Oakwood. This old man helped us get the meeting going in Oakwood. He's down there, he's like, one day we all gonna have this fellowship. It's gonna be all inclusive. We're gonna all work together, you know, AA and NA and all that. I said, we already got that. It's all inclusive. It's narcotics. No. We're not interested in what you do. We're just interested in what you want to do about your problem. Anybody who's ever ran for position at area, at region, or any zone, anything else, every time you take the nomination, there's a chance your ass gonna lose. It's just a chance.
What are you talking about?
I'm talking, somebody made the remark about someone being on some kind of medical, you know, whatever they were using.
I
If you're using pain medication, I'm probably not giving you the checkbook for the Georgia region. I'm not looking after that.
Hey, George, I have a suggestion for you as the PR chair for the Northeast Georgia area.
Yeah.
It's just, the suggestion would be to actually participate in region.
Well, I would if you wouldn't schedule it while I'm hosting the convention.
We would like to see you and have you be a part of first before you look outside for other help. We'd just like to have you, but anyway.
Well, you got duplicating meetings.
I know. Joe, you have a question?
Yeah, about 4 years ago, the Southeast Zone participated in the National Heroin and Prescription Drug Summit. Right? Yes. And while we were there, that was my first experience with professionals actually looking at our MAT pamphlet. At the beginning, they came in with the thought already in their mind that we were just rigid. We had several professionals, including some doctors, come back to our booth and say, we appreciate your stance, because it basically tells what NA stance is. And I think we need to communicate that more so to the professional level and to the RCOs and whatever, to understand where we're at, because we're not, you know, it tells us that we got members with strong opinions about this, but that's not NA. So don't put us in that, don't, you know, stigmatize us, because, you know, that's the way it always used to be. See, I remember, I heard my man talking, I remember in the 80s when half the room was nodding. I remember that. I remember it. But a lot of those people today are 30-some odd years clean.
That's right.
You know, so you can't take a stance that because if you're taking MATs or whatever, you know, you don't belong here. And see, and another thing I also noticed on the clinical side of things, sometimes they don't identify as the long-term solution. They just don't, you know. Figure it was 601 vendors at that event. We were the only recovery 12-step or type of recovery thing that was actually at that event, right? And it just, but there's a lot of clinicals, and see, I believe in clinical because I went through 28 days of rehab and then 11 months of halfway house. So it's not like I don't have an understanding or dislike for it, but there's a disconnect. There's a disconnect between the clinical side and the recovery side. All we just want to be is part of the conversation when you suggested things. We don't necessarily be the only conversation. We just want to be part of the conversation. And then sometimes that's not nurtured, you know. And I feel like that it needs to be, because like I said, I've been doing PR since I've been PI. I got 20 some odd years in public relations. So I understand the evolution and the changes that has happened over the year. You know, we used to put our number, 1-800 numbers in the classified section of the newspaper. When the last time anybody in this room picked up a newspaper? So it has to evolve, right? It has to evolve. But that stigma of who we are also has to evolve. And we're looking forward to places like the RCOs and the professionals to help clear up some of that and not take that stance that we don't take any longer. Right.
Yeah.
You know? So what can you guys do to help help us get rid of that stigma in terms of your clientele?
Well, I think a lot of this conversation has to do with the service structure of NA. You know, PR can say all they want to, but ultimately each group is who PR answers to. So it's kind of hard to get groups that don't agree and then everyone have the same message. And whether that's good or not, I don't know. But I mean, personally, for me, NA is probably the first thing people are exposed to when they walk into our building, because I have NA quilts and NA symbol. I mean, because that's my recovery, and I don't have to hide it. So I have the stuff and I talk about it with people like, what have you tried? Have you been to an NA meeting? Are you interested in going to an NA meeting? If you have been to an NA meeting, have you gotten a sponsor? Have you gotten people's phone numbers? Have you, you know, all the things that we do when we're new in recovery. But it's also my job to help people sustain their recovery. And so if they are doing MAT and going to NA and they get off of their MAT, then I'm here to encourage them to keep going to NA and to keep being involved. And, you know, we have peers that come to NA and they come to our center and they do check-ins with us. And one of them, I was like, you need to come to area on Saturday and we're going to put you on the CPC. And he did, and he is, and he's the vice activities chair for the CPC now because he has enough clean time. So, I mean, it's not that I'm sitting here telling people they shouldn't go to NA, because that's not it at all. It's that if there's people that have tried it or don't want to try it, I'm still providing an option for them to get better.
Sure, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But you know, you also know too that there are some facilities, I'm not pointing fingers or whatever, but there's some facility that leans to say AA, and they're actually sending their addicts to go to an 8-8 meeting versus coming to the
Yeah,
8-8 meeting.
and that might be different if we had different options. Like where I live there is a huge, wonderful, thriving area of NA where I live, and we have a lot of unity, and we have people that actually participate in our ASC meeting and continuity of service and all that. So that's what I know, you know, so.
Okay, not to cut off, I did want to do one follow-up to George. In all honesty, we haven't really been participating. The Georgia region hasn't really been participating in the Southeast Zone PR efforts either. And I think we can make a mutual effort to try to resolve our scheduling conflicts. I'm not here to whine. We do, when you are talking to NA members, I would recommend also pointing out that service can help you stay clean, because after COVID, we are down our usual amount of trusted service. I would say that. And we had some hands raised here. Yes. Okay. I think I'm sorry. Pam, Sherry. Yes.
Hi, I'm Sherry, and I'm an addict, and thank you guys for being here. And speak up.
Speak up.
Thank you guys for being here. One of the challenges that we have, a couple of them, and you know, it'd be great if we could work together on that, is some of the potential members coming into our meetings, they don't understand the philosophy of Narcotics Anonymous. They don't understand that we are total abstinence for the disease of addiction, substance abuse disorder. And they're coming in with an idea, because in other venues, other resources that you guys give out, they are clean. But in Narcotics Anonymous, we have a different philosophy, but they're coming in, and a lot of times, I'm not saying all the times, it sounds like they're, just do not understand, the difference and how, even though they're on medication assisted treatment, we love you unconditionally, come in, get a hug, and sit down and get a cup of coffee. We want you here. But we also have the public relations brochure on medication assisted treatment that gives us, Narcotics Anonymous stance, which also states basically what I just said, but also that we may have individuals or individual groups that may feel different and may respond different. And so it's a very clear message to potential members as far as some expectations of coming into Narcotics Anonymous. But the first one being everyone's welcome in our meeting. No matter who you are, what you are, it doesn't matter. And one of the things that would be so helpful to our fellowship is to, give a little heads up on the philosophy of Narcotics Anonymous with that brochure, and also with the one on mental illness, because there is a difference. It's, and that's one of the challenges Narcotics Anonymous has, is because we have, I know myself, has said that's a different medication. It's for the disease of mental illness. Now that substance abuse disorder is coming under mental illness, it makes that differentiation a little more difficult for us as far as medication for the disease of addiction and medication for mental illness. Because my first input about Narcotics Anonymous 35 years ago was NA kills because of medication. At that point, that was my first exposure in a treatment facility. And, I still went to NA because guess what? We were the best game in town back in the 80s. And that's not true. And we understand that. We respect that, because I'll play, it's my term too, where recovery is not cookie cutter. And everybody has different needs as far as where they can go. Some people, as was said earlier, needs to be on methadone or drug replacement the rest of their lives. But the thing is the opportunity, and to be able to know that I was told I was going to be on medication the rest of my life. At 3 years clean, I decided to see if that was true. But I also went into it with help and assistance. And, and it was for mental illness. I haven't had to do it, since then for, 32 years now. So everyone's different, and and so, but the main thing for us is the understanding of that everyone is loved and welcomed in our fellowship, but we do have a philosophy that we as NA members need to respect and uphold. I feel that way because it's my fellowship and our fellowship. And that, but the thing is that, if we go at the beginning, then the end will follow as far as, hey, we've got a story in our basic text called Narcotics Anonymous that there's people who've been on medication. I've been approached by a person that was on Suboxone, medication assisted treatment for 5 years and was told NA has to change. And, yeah. And, I went to a venue where there was a lot of different resources there. And that was one of the resources. So, that's some of the things that we get, feedback on. And the thing is that we want to respect all the resources. We want to respect all because we all have one goal, and that's to save a life. And so, with that, but if we work together and understanding our differences, but also our similarities and our consistent goal, then, I think we can, it'll work. But that's one thing, is understanding NA's philosophy for the disease of addiction is a big challenge that I know we've experienced. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing. So I want to remind the folks here that everybody on this panel are NA members.
We know.
And we also work in a professional setting, and that, you know, that those are different things, right? So I just want to just remind folks of that. And I know this medication piece is a huge like thing, and everybody's got, and so this has turned into a medication conversation versus like, you know, and I get it. I know that it's a whole thing, right? I get it. And people feel really.
I would encourage our members again to read the pamphlet. It does not sound as harsh as the person that just shared. And that while you're entitled to your own personal viewpoint for public relations, we go by the IP. And it doesn't say what you just said exactly. So, yes.
Also, we'll be here all weekend.
Okay.
This
Thank you. I
particular
appreciate that.
event was slated to end. We did extend it. I don't know if what Jay wants to do, but I just felt compelled
Okay.
to say that.
We've got people raising their hands.
Can I make one comment to that?
Okay, if we keep going. Okay.
Can I make one comment to that as well? And just what Hank said is the fact that all of us here are NA members. I'm a one chip wonder. But I worked my ass off with the steps and learning the traditions and what you guys taught me to do. Everybody that works at Reboot are NA members and attend meetings and have sponsors and work the steps and are aware of the traditions. And we do what you asked. I can't speak for other RCOs. I can speak for Reboot. And what I know Reboot does is we do teach our people, hey, you know, when you go into meeting, you get your coffee and you go sit down over there. And at the end of the meeting, you can get up and shake hands and communicate, keep your distractions down. You know, we teach our peers that about 12-step meetings. So I understand what you're saying in encouraging them. This is the NA way, which is what I think we're here to discuss and talk about.
We are.
And that's what we teach our peers at our RCO. And like I said, I can't speak for other RCOs. I can speak for Reboot. And so, yeah, we do that at our RCO. You know, we're not here to take nothing away from you. That saved my life, and it saved everybody that works for us' life.
But it's also our responsibility as members of NA in our meeting to talk to those people one-on-one after the meeting. If they say something out of line or if they do something, you know, we all need to be reaching out to those newcomers with love and explaining that to them on a one-on-one basis. And, you know, that's our responsibility as NA members.
Right. Like that's the part where I disagree was that the pamphlet does not talk about it being on other people's responsibility to prepare potential NA members with our philosophy. It does really talk about a difference in attitude toward people walking in the door of being accepted. And that we would teach them our philosophy slowly with love, but not we would ask other people to do it on our behalf. That's all I was trying to say. Yes.
I'm gonna name John. And do y'all identify yourselves at y'all RSO as addicts to y'all clients?
Yeah, absolutely.
Y'all don't tell them y'all addicts, I'm in long-term recovery.
So
I just want to know that just
You
one.
gotta hang.
Yes, no.
Yes.
Yes. Which one y'all identify?
So I'm an addict.
I identify as a person in recovery.
Okay.
Right, in my professional stance, I'm not representing Narcotics Anonymous. I identify as a person in recovery.
And when I'm at an NA meeting, I am an addict.
That's
And
right.
when I'm at an AA meeting, I'm an alcoholic.
It's a business thing. What you business?
Yeah, because
What I'm trying to determine who need my areas, right? I've been to a few RSOs and me and at my home group had a meeting at a treatment center, and the lady said she was in long-term recovery, and I tried to explain to her what narcotics did, and she pushed my hand away. And she said, in my 18 years of long-term recovery, I did this. So I told her my 28 years of Narcotics Anonymous, we do this. I hand you these pamphlets, right? So when I've been to plenty of Georgia schools of addiction, and all I hear is you got to check, right? Then I go to them little meetings I sit in the back, right? But they're coming where I live at. And I'm here today find out what y'all do, so I can know who to call, know who to talk to. But since I'm in Savannah, they always been sending ads to the other villages. When I went there, they told me, you need to, you know, the folks on the back row, you know, with a lot of clean time. They say, oh, you need to go to the other village, right? I'm
Okay.
just trying to be in the day, find out how we can work with y'all in peace and harmony, right? And so y'all can know what we do.
Right.
Y'all can know what we're right first, right?
Okay.
So can I say something?
Yes.
So when I say my name is Jen and I'm a person in long-term recovery, usually that's to an audience of people that don't know what recovery is. And when I'm speaking to that audience of people, I want to show them that hope exists and that recovery exists. And if I use the word addict to them, that's a negative term. So that is why someone would say I'm a person in long-term recovery. But to you guys, I'm Jen, I'm an addict, you know. Yeah.
Look, part of having people here is if we're putting people on the defensive, where they're having to basically say that, you know, differentiate between their personal and professional, and you know, that's not, to me, it's one thing to express ourselves, but sometimes our opinions, even just here, don't sound like they would be welcoming in a group because they don't sound welcoming here. So, I mean, I just think we need to look at that in public relations. We're not trying to change other people. But you gentlemen.
This man had his hand up here for a long time.
I'm an addict. And, I currently work for CDC as an opioid educator on the overdose. So through the health department, I've worked in direct care. I'm a substance abuse counselor, and I'm a peer, certified peer. So I understand the need to say long-term recovery because they think that professionals, they tell us when you're in a professional setting, addict sounds, it's negative, it's stigmatized. And there's a great promotion right now to destigmatize, you know, take the stigma out of substance abuse treatment. But when I came to Narcotics Anonymous in 1988, there was one meeting in my hometown of Narcotics Anonymous. And the people there would say, hey, come in, shut the F up, sit down, blah, 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 whatever. A guy that went to treatment with me, he couldn't take that. He couldn't take that kind of talk, that kind of language. So he went to the other fellowship, and that's where he stayed for the whole entire 33 years of his recovery until he died this year of cancer. I unfortunately needed that kind of instruction. Sit the F up, shut the F up. I needed that because I was so rebellious. And so I managed to stay clean in Narcotics Anonymous. But my point is this: we need to let Narcotics Anonymous be a resource for recovery. They are separate entities, and there is no way they are parallel. They're not going to cross anywhere.
That's right.
They are not going. They're two parallel lines going in the same direction of better health, better well-being, better care. They're not going to cross over.
Thank you.
So there's no need for us to try public relations. We need to say, hey, look, guys. When I worked for 3 of the largest methadone clinics in the country. And my supervisor said, now, you're not supposed to be on methadone but like a year, truly. Now, people have different things, stay on the rest of your life, make you feel better, blah, blah, blah. Methadone is only, it's about something only used to keep you from being sick while you're transitioning, right? My supervisor said, if you tell them folks to go to Narcotics Anonymous and decrease their dose, you're going out their door. This is a for-profit company. And so that's what we did. I never said, like, there was somebody who, you know, 20-something, and I saw that they was, you know, I was like, hey, don't tell nobody. Just sit there until you feel better. telling you, don't say I'm clean, I've been clean for 6 months. I'm on 3 milligram dose. I'm on a 3 milligram dose, but I whispered this to them in secret. Hey. And so that's what I had to do when I sent people to Narcotics Anonymous. Because I need my check. I got children that need to eat. Gotta protect the check. I'm not trying to lose no money. That's my job. So I did my job. But my point is, I really didn't even want to weigh in on this. But as a peer right now, working for the CDC, I have to say, hey, look, there are many pathways to recovery. You need to go, you can go to Celebrate Recovery. You can go to AA, you can go to NA, you can do harm reduction, do this, that, and other, whatever you want to do, whatever makes you comfortable. And I'm going to be here to lead you in that direction. If I need to put you on the road to Celebrate Recovery, I'm going to say, hey, there's Celebrate Recovery, whatever. I'm not allowed to share my personal recovery. I'm not even allowed to disclose a lot of my personal issues. But because I'm in Narcotics Anonymous, and we in Narcotics Anonymous, like, we freely share what was freely given to us, I am compelled on some days to say, look, man, this is what happened. I stole the car, I did the TV, why did this, that, and the other? Don't be in that, man. They're going to help you. And sometimes I even say, Kevin Johnson, because that's where I recover.
Okay. Thank you for sharing, Ramon.
Hey, I'm an addict. My name is Ramon. First of all, thank you very much for coming out here and giving up your day. I know sometimes that's not difficult. The fellowship, when we're invited, sometimes that's not difficult, right? To take a break from work, to come out here and help educate ourselves, to better trust the service, to be better members, to participate in the community. So really, thank you. I was thinking, like, I heard different things like, how can we help you? And then I'm looking now, and the professionals that are here were wearing 2 hats. It's what we're left with. So maybe now we need to start talking to the conversation, guiding it into the direction is, how can we better help ourselves to help them do their jobs? Because as a member of public relations for more than a minute, right, I found myself in 2010 going before the governor for a party. And a couple of guys before me went up and he said, well, we could consider sending him to Narcotics Anonymous, but those people don't stay clean. And I heard this on the cabinet floor, and it bothered me. So a few years later, being a public relations chair for the Florida region, I was sent to FADA, which is the Florida Alcohol Addiction Summit, something like that. I don't remember, it's been a while. Something. And guess who I run into? That same governor and the attorney general. What a great opportunity for him. 2 years later, that man won. But we have to be ready to go out and do some work. Yeah. That's right. You know what I mean? Yeah. And part of the work is, are we following up? I made a connection. The person that came behind me, then I gave that person to make the connection. Or we just assume that that person's going to go ahead and follow up on our calls. And sometimes, a lot of times I get in the process of being part of PR, and the responses that I get is that we don't follow through. So sometimes we have to take responsibility for our own actions to help the professionals do their job, and they don't get what they hear is, oh, those people over there really like it. You know, information, Southeast Zoning Forum has a public relations task force meeting once a month. There are 2 member areas from Georgia that do attend, the Marietta region and the Piedmont region. What area that is? Yes, Piedmont. So they do attend. And there's a bunch of resources there that we can have. And there's some information that we're going to talk about tomorrow. I don't want to address it, but I think that, you know, I wanted to thank you guys for coming out, and also that we need to look at ourselves. I don't know the CSUs are always the solution. We had the same exact conversation, I think, 6 years ago at the Florida Region Service Symposium.
Right.
Was how do we identify meetings that will welcome members on replacement therapy? Because yes, we do have meetings that we're just not welcome. And that's the reality. So sometimes I believe in my area went ahead and did that. We addressed.
We are really about out of time, so.
Okay, I can speed that up. We addressed it on the area floor. We asked the groups, we took a survey, who was gonna welcome them, who wasn't, and we gave that information to the professionals.
Okay, we've got Lisa and Craig that still want to share. Craig, did you have something?
No, I just was gonna see how many people we still had online, and I didn't want us to forget the fact that we have people online.
Lisa G's
Not
trying
just
to
the
get
presenters
in
here.
online. I understand. Lisa G, did you have something?
Hey. Yeah, you know what, I wanted to say, because I know that we have exhausted all of our time. And, you know, first I want to say that, you know, I'm so glad to be a part of this dialogue, right? You know, I think it's always going to be, public relations is always going to be in this place where in reaching out and bringing other people into the NA space, that we're coming from different philosophies. You know what I'm saying? One thing I would love to see, because I heard that there's some new material coming out on MAT. Definitely don't want to be MAT anymore. There's some new material that's coming out on it, and that's amazing. What I see that public relations can show up different is in continuing to create this dialogue. This dialogue is meaningful as not only Narcotics Anonymous has changed, but our world has changed. So like if Narcotics Anonymous is taking a different stance on MAT, that needs to be communicated not only in that pamphlet, but it needs to be communicated so that communication falls down to the group level. You know what I'm saying? Because I keep hearing people say, well, the groups aren't welcoming, the groups aren't welcoming. And you know what? Unfortunately, we can't put a policy in place to make people show up different. You know what I'm saying? MAT is one of the areas that we need to show up different in. We discussed several different areas today that we need to show up different in. The only thing that I want to say is I appreciate being part of this dialogue, but I pray that there's continued dialogue as Narcotics Anonymous has to continue to show up different in order to be inclusive and accessible for everybody. So I appreciate you all for inviting me here and having me be a part of the panel. Thank you.
Thank you for coming. Thank you, Lisa. Dina, thank you for all the people that came. I would like to just say a couple things like, yeah, I think we should be able to express opinions freely. There's no penalty for disagreeing. Hopefully that comes across. And that basically, we hope this is the first of many. We want to have an ongoing communication because really it is public relations, which implies that we would actually have a relationship. And I know that you have a relationship with George in your area where you're located, but we would also like to keep that relationship and that communication going from region. Appreciate you. Definitely want to follow up with you and about what we can do next. Reese, if you have any suggestions or ways we can help, please let us know.
Now, George paid us to be up here.
Okay.
You're gonna double what George paid you.
And you know, so we'll do more. How about that? Let's try to do some more. And if you guys want, if anybody from after participating today would like to participate more in the more, please let me know. You can always reach me at PR@grscna.com. And actually, that's not just me. That's our whole team, right? And that makes sure that we are being responsive so that somebody will get back right away. But I really appreciate everybody coming and the help from Molina and Joel, from the different zones, from the two Craig, right? boards for actually arranging for this place and paying the people to be here. I really appreciate that. And Ramon, where's Ramon? Is he still here? There he is. Okay, Ramon, thank you, buddy. And we do want to, Georgia Region does want to come Tuesday night at 8. It's a killer, but we'll have to talk.
Check the email.
It's
already there.
Okay.
more people.
Because my home group's Tuesday, 8 o'clock. Anyway, let yours too. Okay. We have more people on the committee. We have a way to get it done. So let's try to do together what we can't do by ourselves. That's going to be my prayer to myself. But anyway, I really appreciate everybody coming and participating. Thank you.
Thanks, Jay.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Appreciate it.